The archivist's warning. Eerie atmospheric music. Sound of wind, distant creaking footsteps on old wooden floors. There are places in this world where the veil between the living and the dead grows thin. Places where something went terribly wrong, where suffering echoed so loudly that it left permanent scars on reality itself. And there are people, unfortunate people, who find these places, who stumble into stories that were never meant to be told. I am one of those people. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, and I'm a paranormal researcher. Not the kind you see on television shouting at shadows with night vision cameras. I'm an archivist, a collector of accounts, a documenter of the inexplicable. For 15 years I've traveled across the country gathering testimonies, photographs, evidence of supernatural phenomena. I've catalogued hundreds of hauntings. Most are benign, residual energy, emotional imprints, echoes of the past playing on loop. But some are different. Some are active. Where? Malevolent. What I'm about to share with you are 8 accounts from my archive. 8 interconnected stories that I've kept locked away, that I've tried to forget, that have haunted my dreams for 3 years. I'm sharing them now because I've finally understood the pattern, the connection between them. And because I'm afraid that keeping them secret makes me complicit in what's coming. These stories are linked by something I've come to call the chain. A series of hauntings connected not by location or time, but by the victims themselves. Each person in these accounts encountered something terrible, survived to tell the tale, and then, unknowingly, passed the curse to someone else. Like a contagion. Like a message being relayed through unwilling messengers. I don't know where the chain began. I don't know where it will end. But I know this: I'm part of it now. By collecting these stories, by listening to the victims, by documenting their experiences, I've made myself the next link. And soon so will you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about Michael Reeves, the man who came to my office on a cold October evening and told me a story that changed everything. The property on Blackwood Lane. Michael Reeves was a real estate agent. Successful, rational, the kind of man who believed in market values and square footage, not ghosts or superstition. When he came to my office, he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. His hands trembled as he set a manila folder on my desk. "I need you to document this," he said without preamble. "I need someone to know what happened. In case I don't make it." I gestured for him to sit. He did, but kept glancing over his shoulder at the door as if expecting something to follow him in. "Start from the beginning," I said, pulling out my recorder. "Tell me everything." Michael took a shaking breath and began. "It started 6 months ago. I was hired to sell a property on Blackwood Lane, an old Victorian house that had been empty for 8 years. The owner had died and the estate wanted it sold quickly. They were offering me double commission if I could close the sale within 3 months. I should have known something was wrong when I saw the price. The house was beautiful. Original woodwork, stained glass windows, situated on 2 acres of land in a desirable neighborhood. It should have been worth at least $800,000. They were asking $200,000. And when I looked into the history, I found that it had been listed and relisted 17 times in the past decade. Never sold. People would make offers, then withdraw them before closing. But I needed the commission. My daughter needed surgery and insurance wasn't covering all of it. So I took the listing. The first time I entered the house, it was a beautiful spring afternoon. Sunlight streamed through those stained glass windows, painting colored patterns on the dusty floors. The house was silent except for the normal sounds: settling wood, wind in the eaves. I walked through room after room, taking photographs, making notes, planning how I'd stage it for showings. Then I reached the 3rd floor. There was a hallway with 6 doors, all closed. 5 of them opened easily when I tried the handles. Normal bedrooms, empty except for dust and old wallpaper. But the 6th door, the one at the end of the hall, was locked. I could see light coming from underneath it, though. Not sunlight. Something else. Something that flickered like candlelight. I called out. No answer. I tried the handle again, rattled it. The door was solid, wouldn't budge. And while I stood there, I heard something from inside the room. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps approaching the door from the other side. I should have left. Every instinct told me to leave. But I was thinking about square footage, about whether this was a usable bedroom or just storage, about how to describe the 3rd floor in the listing. So I waited. The footsteps stopped on the other side of the door. I could hear breathing, ragged, wet breathing like someone with fluid in their lungs. Then a voice. Barely a whisper coming through the crack under the door. "Tell them I'm sorry." I stumbled backward, nearly fell down the stairs in my hurry to get away. I left the house, sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Just old house sounds. Acoustics playing tricks. Maybe a homeless person had broken in and was squatting there. I called the police to check it out. 2 officers went through the entire house, including the 3rd floor. All the doors were unlocked, they said. All the rooms were empty. No sign of occupancy. They looked at me like I was wasting their time. I went back the next day with a contractor friend, told him I needed a second opinion on the 3rd floor. We went up together. All 6 doors were open. All 6 rooms were empty. And when I looked at the door at the end of the hall, the one that had been locked, the one where I'd heard the voice, the handle was covered in rust, hadn't been touched in years. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd experienced. So I started researching the house's history. What I found made my blood run cold. The previous owner, the one who died 8 years ago, was a woman named Margaret Thorne. She'd lived in the house alone for 40 years after her husband died. And she died in that locked room on the 3rd floor. Died slowly over the course of 3 days, after suffering a stroke that left her paralyzed but conscious. They found her on the floor where she dragged herself trying to reach the door, trying to call for help. She died alone, unable to move, unable to speak, while the world went on outside her window. The coroner estimated she'd been dead for over a week before anyone noticed. No one had checked on her. No one had missed her. She'd died trying to apologize to someone. Emergency responders found the word, "sorry," scratched into the floor in front of the door, carved with her fingernails before she lost consciousness. After I learned this, I should have dropped the listing. But I thought maybe this explained it. Residual energy, an echo of her death. If I could just ignore it, if I could just get someone to buy the house, it would be over. So I scheduled showings. The first 3 families left within 10 minutes. They wouldn't tell me why, just made excuses about the layout or the neighborhood. The 4th family, a couple with 2 young children, stayed longer. They seemed interested, were discussing offers when their 6-year-old daughter came downstairs from the 3rd floor, crying. She was holding a piece of paper. "The lady upstairs gave me this," she said. "She said to give it to you." The paper was old, yellowed, torn at the edges. Written on it in shaky handwriting were 3 words, "Tell them sorry." The family left immediately. And I went up to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding, to that locked door that shouldn't be locked. It was standing open. And inside the room, spread across the floor in dust and dirt, were hundreds of pieces of paper. All of them had the same message. "Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry." Written over and over and over. I ran. I got in my car and drove away, and I swore I wouldn't go back. But that night I had a dream. Margaret Thorne was standing at the foot of my bed, her face twisted with desperation. She was trying to speak, but no sound came out. She just mouthed those same words. "Tell them I'm sorry." I woke up gasping, my wife asking what was wrong. I told her it was just a nightmare. But the next morning there was a piece of paper on my nightstand. That same yellowed paper, that same shaky handwriting. "Tell them sorry." My wife hadn't seen anyone come in. My daughter hadn't heard anything. But the paper was there, real and tangible and impossible. It happened again the next night. And the next. Every night, Margaret Thorne would appear in my dreams, desperate, pleading, trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. And every morning there would be another note. I tried to research her history to understand who she needed to apologize to. I found obituaries for her husband. He died in 1982. No other family listed. No children. Her only sister had died 20 years before her. There was no one left to apologize to. No one left to receive her message. But she kept trying to deliver it. Through me. Through her house. Through anyone who would listen. After 2 weeks I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the estate's lawyer, told them I was dropping the listing, that they needed to find someone else. The lawyer, a woman named Sarah Chin, listened to my story with a strange expression. Then she told me something that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Reeves, you're the 18th agent we've hired for this property. All the others quit for similar reasons. Nightmares, messages, the feeling that something was following them. Most of them dropped it within a week. You lasted longer than most. Then why do you keep hiring people? I asked. If you know the house is haunted. Because it's our legal obligation to try to sell it. But honestly, I don't think it can be sold. I think Margaret Thorne's spirit won't allow it. She needs something from whoever enters that house. She needs them to understand something, to do something. Until that happens, I think she'll keep reaching out. I left that meeting feeling sick. Because I understood what the lawyer was saying. This wasn't ending. Margaret Thorne had latched onto me and she wasn't letting go. That night was the worst. I dreamed I was in that locked room on the 3rd floor. Margaret was there, her form translucent, flickering like the light I'd seen under the door. She was on her hands and knees, scratching at the floorboards, writing the same message over and over with broken fingernails. And this time I could hear her voice, not speaking but echoing inside my head. I locked the door, she said. I locked it because I was angry. Angry at everyone who'd abandoned me, who'd forgotten me, who'd let me live alone in this house for 40 years. I locked it so they'd have to break it down to find me, so they'd have to face what they'd done. But no one came. No one noticed I was gone. No one cared enough to break down a door. She turned to look at me, her eyes hollow and desperate. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I didn't mean to die alone. Tell them I forgive them. Tell them. I woke up screaming. My wife was shaking me, terrified. And when I looked at my hands, they were covered in dust and rust as if I'd been clawing at an old door. The next morning I went back to the house one last time. I had to know if it was real, if any of this was real. I climbed to the 3rd floor, to that room at the end of the hall. The door was open. And inside the floor was clean. No papers. No dust. Just those words, still visible where Margaret had carved them with her dying breath. Sorry. I understood then. She wasn't trying to haunt anyone. She wasn't trying to scare anyone away. She just needed someone to witness her death, to know that she'd died with regret, to understand that her final act, locking herself away in anger, had become her eternal prison. I sat in that room for an hour and I spoke to her. I told her I understood. I told her I was sorry no one had come. I told her she was forgiven, that she could rest now, that her message had been received. And for a moment, just a moment, I felt warmth in that cold room. Like she was there with me, like she'd finally been heard. Then it was gone and the room was just a room again. Empty. Quiet. At peace. I thought it was over. I thought I'd freed her. But that night, Michael's voice broke. He looked at me with eyes that had seen something terrible. That night someone else visited my dreams. Not Margaret. Someone different. A man in a navy uniform, his face burned beyond recognition, his hands reaching for me. And when I woke up there was a new note on my nightstand. Different handwriting. Different paper. But the same desperate plea. Tell them I'm sorry. Dr. Marsh, I didn't free Margaret Thorne's spirit. I just made myself visible to all of them. Every ghost with unfinished business. Every spirit with a message they died trying to deliver. They found me. And they're all trying to speak through me. Michael slid the manila folder across my desk. There are 7 of them so far. 7 different ghosts, 7 different messages. I've documented everything. The dreams, the notes, the histories I've researched. I need you to archive this. Because I don't know how long I can hold them back. I don't know what happens when the 8th one arrives. He stood up, still shaking. I can feel them even now. Waiting. Watching. They know I've told you. They know you're listening. Michael walked to the door, then paused. Be careful, Dr. Marsh. When you read those accounts, when you document those stories, you're doing exactly what I did. You're making yourself visible to them. You're making yourself the next link in the chain. He left. I never saw him again. 3 days later, I received a call from his wife. Michael had died in his sleep. The official cause was heart failure, but she told me something else. When they found him, his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror, and his hands were clenched around a piece of paper. She'd read what was written on it but wouldn't tell me the words. She just said they frightened her and that she'd burned the note. But I knew what it said. Because that same night, I dreamed of Michael Reeves standing at the foot of my bed, his mouth moving soundlessly, trying to deliver one final message. And when I woke up, there was a note on my nightstand, written in his handwriting. I'm sorry. You're next. Music intensifies, then quiets to an unsettling ambient sound. Narrator, that was 3 years ago. Since then I've been investigating the 7 accounts that Michael left me. 7 different hauntings, 7 different victims, all connected by the chain. Each one tried to help a spirit find peace, and each one became a conduit for the next ghost in the sequence. I've documented them all. And in doing so I've made myself part of the pattern. I dream of them now, all 8. Margaret Thorne in her locked room. The burned sailor. The others I haven't told you about yet. They all visit me. They all have messages. And they're all waiting for me to pass those messages on to you. Because by listening to this, by hearing these stories, you're doing exactly what I did. You're making yourself visible. You're making yourself the next link. The second story begins with a woman named Claire Davidson, who bought a mirror at an estate sale and discovered that reflections can show you more than just what's standing in front of them. Much more. None of it good. But before I tell you about Claire, I need you to understand something. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're not fiction designed to scare you. They're accounts. Documentation. Evidence. And evidence has power. The power to make things real. The power to make the invisible visible. So I'll ask you now, do you want to continue? Do you want to hear the rest of the chain? Because once you've heard all 8 stories, once you understand the pattern, you'll be part of it too. And when the 9th spirit comes looking for someone to carry its message, it might choose you. Long pause, unsettling ambient sound continues. Think carefully, because the chain is always looking for its next link. And now that you've heard about Michael Reeves, now that you know about Margaret Thorne and the locked room and the message she died trying to deliver, you're already halfway there. Music swells ominously, then fades to silence. The mirror's memory. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of wind chimes, distant traffic, the creak of an old house settling. If you're still listening, then you've made your choice. You want to know more. You want to understand the chain. And perhaps you don't quite believe that listening can make you part of it. I understand. I didn't believe it either at first. But before we continue, let me tell you what happened to me last night. I woke at 3:17 a.m. I always wake at 3:17 now, have for 3 years, and found my office door open. I live alone. I always lock that door before bed. But it was standing wide open, and from inside I could hear the sound of paper rustling. When I went to investigate, I found my archive scattered across the floor. 7 folders, each one containing the account of someone who became part of the chain. They were arranged in a circle, and in the center was an 8th folder. Waiting. The folder had my name on it. I'm telling you this so you understand. This isn't a story I'm choosing to tell. This is a story that's telling itself through me. And now through you. Let me tell you about Claire Davidson and the mirror. The reflection that remained. Claire Davidson's folder contains fewer documents than Michael's, but what's there is more disturbing. Photographs that shouldn't exist. A journal with entries in handwriting that isn't Claire's. And a police report that raises more questions than it answers. I never met Claire. She died before I could interview her. But her sister, Amanda, came to me 6 months after Claire's death, carrying a box of her sister's belongings and a story that she needed someone, anyone, to believe. This is what Amanda told me. My sister wasn't superstitious. She was an accountant, for God's sake. Numbers, logic, provable facts. When she bought that mirror at the estate sale, she was just looking for something to fill the empty space in her hallway. It was beautiful. A full-length antique with an ornate gilded frame, Victorian era, probably worth 10 times what she paid for it. The estate sale was for a house that had been abandoned for years, belongings left behind by owners who'd apparently just walked away one day. Claire brought it home, hung it in the hallway outside her bedroom. That was a Thursday. By Sunday she was calling me, frightened, saying something was wrong with the mirror. What do you mean wrong? I asked her. It shows things that aren't there, she said. Or it doesn't show things that are there. Amanda, I don't know how to explain this. But when I look in it, I see myself, but also not myself. Does that make sense? It didn't make sense. I thought she was stressed from work, maybe drinking too much coffee. I told her to get some sleep. He promised she would. But she called again Monday morning, and this time her voice was different. Hollow. Scared in a way I'd never heard from her before. Amanda, I need you to come over. No. Don't ask questions, just come. I drove to her apartment. She let me in, and I could see she hadn't slept. Her eyes were bloodshot, her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing at the hallway where the mirror hung. "Look at it," she said. "Look at the mirror and tell me what you see." I looked. I saw what you'd expect to see. My own reflection, Claire standing next to me, the hallway behind us. Nothing unusual. I told her this. "Keep looking," she whispered. "Wait." So I waited. And after maybe 30 seconds I noticed something. My reflection blinked. Normal enough. But Claire's reflection didn't. Her reflection just stared, unmoving, while the real Claire next to me was breathing heavily, terrified. Then I saw it. Claire's reflection smiled. Not the real Claire. Just the reflection. A slow, deliberate smile that didn't match anything the real Claire was doing. I stepped back from the mirror, my heart pounding. What the hell? "It started Friday night," Claire said, her voice shaking. I was getting ready for bed, walked past the mirror and noticed my reflection was still there. Still standing in the hallway. Even though I'd already gone into my bedroom. I thought I was seeing things, so I went back to check. And my reflection, it waved at me. It waved first. Before I moved my hand. She led me to her bedroom, away from the mirror. It's gotten worse every day. Friday it just waved. Saturday it started moving differently, not matching what I was doing. Sunday I woke up and went to the bathroom, and when I came back my reflection was standing in the hallway waiting for me. It had been there the whole time I was gone, just waiting. And this morning, Claire pulled out her phone, showed me a photograph. It was a selfie she'd taken in front of the mirror. In the photo Claire looked normal, smiling slightly, holding her phone up. But her reflection in the mirror wasn't taking a picture. Her reflection was reaching out of the mirror, her hand extended toward the camera, fingers splayed as if trying to grab something. I stared at the photo, my skin crawling. "Claire, this has to be fake. Some kind of glitch or..." "It's not fake." He was crying now. "Amanda, I know how this sounds. But something is wrong with that mirror. There's something in it or behind it or... I don't know. But it's showing me things. Things I don't want to see." "Then get rid of it," I said. "Take it down, throw it away, whatever. Just get it out of your apartment." I tried. Claire's voice rose in pitch. "I tried to take it down yesterday. But when I touched the frame I felt hands. Reaching through from the other side. Cold hands touching mine. And I heard a voice, Amanda. Whispering from inside the mirror. Don't leave me alone. Please don't leave me alone." I wanted to think she was having a breakdown. I wanted to believe there was a rational explanation. But I'd seen that photograph. I'd seen her reflection smile when she didn't. And when I looked back toward the hallway, I could swear I saw movement in that mirror, even though we were both in the bedroom nowhere near it. "Stay here tonight," I told her. "Stay at my place. We'll figure this out tomorrow. Maybe call someone to remove the mirror or..." "It won't matter," Claire said quietly. "Because it's not just the mirror anymore. This morning I saw her in my bathroom mirror. And in the window reflection when I was making coffee. She's in every reflection now. Every surface that can show me back to myself. She's there too." "She?" I asked. "Who's she?" Claire pulled out a piece of paper, a printout from a historical society website. It showed a black and white photograph from 1952. A woman standing in front of a house, smiling at the camera. She looked almost exactly like Claire. Same build, same facial structure, same hair. Her name was Catherine Morrison, Claire said. She owned the house where that estate sale was held. I researched it after the mirror started acting strange. Catherine Morrison lived alone in that house for 30 years. And in 1982 she hanged herself. They found her 3 weeks later. She'd positioned herself in front of that mirror. The police report says it looked like she was staring at her own reflection when she died. I felt cold all over. "Claire. I think she's been in that mirror ever since," Claire whispered. "I think her reflection, her last sight before she died, somehow got trapped in there. And now she's trying to get out. She's trying to take my place." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to call a doctor, get Claire some help. But another part of me, the part that had seen that photograph, that had watched the reflection smile, believed her. "We're getting you out of here," I said. "Pack a bag. You're staying with me until we figure this out." Claire nodded, started gathering clothes. I stood guard near the hallway watching that mirror. And as I watched I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the reflection I could see Claire's bedroom. But the Claire in the reflection wasn't packing. She was standing perfectly still facing the mirror, smiling that same wrong smile. And behind her reflection, in the shadowy corner of the reflected bedroom, there was another figure. Tall, thin, feminine. Watching. "Claire," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to go. Now." We left. Claire stayed at my place for 3 days. She seemed better, calmer. She wasn't seeing the reflection anymore. We talked about getting rid of the mirror, maybe hiring someone to remove it from her apartment and destroy it. But on the 4th day, Claire said she needed to go back. She had work files at her apartment, clothes she needed, things she couldn't do without. I offered to go with her, but she said no. She'd be quick, just in and out. That was the last time I spoke to her alive. That evening, when Claire didn't answer her phone, I went to check on her. Her apartment door was unlocked. I went inside, calling her name. No answer. But I could hear something from the hallway. A soft scraping sound. Like fingernails on glass. I found her in front of the mirror. She was standing perfectly still, her face inches from the glass, staring at her reflection. Her hand was pressed against the mirror's surface, and her reflection's hand was pressed back from the other side. They were perfectly aligned, touching through the glass. "Claire," I said. "What are you doing?" She didn't respond. Didn't even blink. Just stood there, staring at herself. And then I noticed something that made me want to scream. Claire wasn't breathing. I could see her chest, perfectly still. No rise and fall. No breath. But her reflection was breathing. I could see it in the mirror. The reflected Claire's chest moving, her lips slightly parted, air moving in and out. "Claire." I grabbed her shoulder, tried to pull her away from the mirror. But she was rigid, immovable like a statue. And when I touched her skin, it was cold. So cold. That's when the reflection spoke. Not Claire. The reflection. "She let me out," it said in Claire's voice, but with something else underneath. Something older, more tired. "She felt so bad for me, trapped in here for so long. So alone. She offered to trade places. Just for a little while," she said. "Just so I could feel real again. Feel alive again." The reflection smiled, and I saw that it was breathing, that it had color in its cheeks, that it looked more alive than the Claire standing motionless in front of me. "I told her I'm sorry," the reflection continued. "I told her I didn't mean for this to happen. But you see, once I was out, I couldn't go back. I couldn't bear to be trapped again, watching life through glass, forever separated from everything real and warm and alive. So she'll have to stay in here now. She'll have to be the reflection. Fair trade, don't you think?" I pulled out my phone, started to dial 911. But the reflection laughed. "They won't believe you. They'll see her body standing there, technically alive, and they'll think she's catatonic. Maybe they'll put her in a hospital. But she'll still be in here, and I'll still be out there living her life. Because I know how to pretend now. I've been watching people through mirrors for 40 years. I know how to act alive." I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. I called the police from outside, told them my sister had collapsed. They came, found Claire standing in front of the mirror, unresponsive. They took her to the hospital. The doctors called it catatonia, brought on by extreme psychological stress. They kept her for 2 weeks, ran every test they could think of. Nothing physically wrong. She just wouldn't move. Wouldn't speak. Wouldn't respond to anything. And then she died. Cardiac arrest, they said. Unexplained. Her body just stopped. But here's what the doctors didn't know, what I couldn't tell them without sounding insane. I visited her every day she was in that hospital. And every day I watched her. And I noticed something. She never blinked. Never breathed unless a doctor was checking her vitals. She was like a mannequin, a shell, something wearing my sister's body but not alive inside it. And whenever I looked at a reflective surface, a window, a phone screen, anything, I could see her. The real Claire. Trapped inside reflections, pressing her hands against the glass, screaming soundlessly, trying to get out. The day after she died, I went back to her apartment. The mirror was still there. And in it, I saw Catherine Morrison wearing Claire's body, smiling at herself in satisfaction. She was free. And Claire was gone. I wanted to smash that mirror, destroy it, make sure this could never happen to anyone else. But before I could, Catherine, in Claire's body, appeared behind me. She must have kept a key to the apartment. "Don't," she said simply. "If you break the mirror, Claire's reflection will shatter too. Whatever's left of her will be gone completely. And besides, she smiled that horrible smile. I'm not in the mirror anymore. I'm here. Breaking the glass won't send me back. She walked past me, ran her hand lovingly over the mirror's frame. But someone should have it. Someone should give it a home. Maybe put it up at another estate sale. Let it find its next owner. Because Catherine Morrison is free now, but the mirror still has a job to do. It still has reflections to catch. And Claire is so lonely in there all by herself. Maybe she'd like some company. She left. Took Claire's life, Claire's identity, everything. And I couldn't prove anything. Couldn't explain to anyone what had really happened. Who would believe that my sister's reflection had swapped places with her? Who would believe that the woman walking around in Claire's body wasn't Claire at all, but a ghost who'd been trapped in a mirror for 4 decades? The apartment was emptied out a month later. Estate sale. The mirror was sold to a dealer who specialized in antiques. I tried to warn him, but he laughed at me. Thought I was trying to drive down the price so I could buy it myself. I don't know where the mirror is now. Don't know who owns it, who's looking into it, who might be seeing their reflection smile when they're not smiling. But I know it's out there. And I know Claire is still trapped inside it, watching helplessly as Catherine Morrison lives her stolen life. Dr. Marsh, I'm telling you this because I need someone to know. I need someone to document what happened. Because I dream of that mirror every night. And in my dreams I see Claire pressing her hands against the glass from the inside, and I see other reflections too. Other people who got trapped, other victims of that mirror's hunger. And I'm afraid that one day, I'll look in a mirror and see something other than my own reflection looking back. Sound of papers rustling, a chair creaking. Amanda Davidson left my office that day and I filed her account with the others. I tried to track down the mirror, but antique mirrors of that style are common, and without a serial number or unique identifying mark, it was impossible to trace. But 3 months ago I received a package. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed a young couple standing in their new apartment, smiling, excited about their first home together. And behind them, hanging in the hallway, was an ornate gilded mirror with a Victorian-era frame. In the mirror's reflection I could see them. But their reflected faces weren't smiling. They were screaming. Tucked behind the photograph was a note, written in handwriting I recognized from Claire Davidson's journal. I told them I'm sorry. But they hung it up anyway. Now we're 3 in here. Soon we'll be 5. Then 10. Then 20. The mirror is hungry. It always has been. And it won't stop until every reflection has a soul trapped inside it. Tell them I'm sorry I couldn't warn them in time. Tell them. The note ended there, torn off mid-sentence. I tried to trace the photograph, to identify the couple, to find the apartment and warn them. But I couldn't. And even if I had, would they have believed me? Would they have listened? Or would they have thought I was insane, just another person spinning ghost stories for attention? Long pause, unsettling ambient sound. The chain claims its victims not through violence or force, but through skepticism. Through the reasonable, rational voice that says ghosts aren't real, mirrors can't trap souls. These stories are just stories. And by the time you realize that voice is wrong, you're already looking at your reflection. Already noticing that it's moving just slightly differently than you are. Already seeing that smile you're not making. Michael Reeves helped a ghost and became a conduit for them. Claire Davidson bought a mirror and became a reflection. And I documented their stories. I made myself a witness. I made myself visible to the chain. The third account is different from the first 2. The third account is about a man named Thomas Way, who worked the night shift at a hospital and learned that some patients never really leave. That some of them stay in the rooms where they died waiting for something. Or someone. And Thomas made the mistake of asking what they were waiting for. But before I tell you about Thomas, I need you to look around the room you're in right now. Look at the shadows in the corners. Look at any mirrors or reflective surfaces. Look at the windows. Do you see anything unusual? Any movement that shouldn't be there? Any reflections that don't quite match? Well, good. But keep watching. Because the chain is patient. And once you've heard enough of these stories, once you've made yourself part of the pattern, the unusual becomes usual. The impossible becomes inevitable. And the thing in the mirror stops pretending to be your reflection. Music swells ominously, then fades. The night shift. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of hospital equipment beeping distantly, fluorescent lights humming, footsteps on linoleum. It's 3:17 a.m. as I record this. Always 3:17. The hour when the veil is thinnest, they say. The hour when the dying most often slip away, when the boundary between worlds becomes permeable. I used to think that was superstition. Now I know it's something worse. It's a schedule. A timetable. The hour when the chain does its work. If you're listening to this at night alone in the dark, you might hear something soon. A creak in the house settling. A sound that might be wind but might not be. Don't convince yourself it's nothing. Don't tell yourself you're imagining things. Because that's what Thomas Way did. And it didn't end well for him. The empty rooms. Thomas Way's file is thicker than the others. Incident reports, security footage logs, psychiatric evaluations and, most disturbingly, audio recordings from the hospital's security system that captured things no one was supposed to hear. I never met Thomas either. He's still alive, technically. But he's been in a psychiatric facility for 2 years now, unable to speak, unable to respond to external stimuli. The doctors say he's catatonic. But I've seen the security footage from his last night at work. Thomas isn't catatonic. He's listening. Always listening. Waiting for something to speak to him again. This is the account I've pieced together from his writings, his colleagues' testimony, and the recordings. Thomas Way was a patient transporter at St. Catherine's Regional Hospital. Night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. His job was simple. Move patients between rooms, take them to imaging, bring them back from surgery. The work was quiet, solitary, perfect for someone who preferred night to day. He'd worked the night shift for 6 years. In that time he'd transported thousands of patients. Some who recovered, some who didn't. It was part of the job. You didn't get attached. You didn't ask questions. You just did your work and went home. But 3 months before his breakdown, something changed. According to his journal, which his supervisor found after the incident and eventually gave to me, it started with room 407. Journal entry September 3rd. Something weird happened tonight. Got called to transport a patient from room 407 to ICU. Woman in her 70s, post-surgical complications. When I arrived, the room was dark except for the monitors. I knocked, called out, announced I was coming in. No response from the patient, which isn't unusual. But when I opened the door, I could swear I heard whispering. Multiple voices, all talking at once, too quiet to make out words. I turned on the light and the whispering stopped. The patient was unconscious, hooked up to various machines. Normal. Except when I moved her bed toward the door, I glanced back at the corner of the room where the whispering had seemed to come from. And for just a second, I swear, I saw someone standing there. An old man in a hospital gown, thin as paper, staring at me with hollow eyes. I blinked and he was gone. Just shadows in the empty corner. I asked the ICU nurse later if room 407 had another patient. She said no, it had been a single occupancy room for the past week. Just the one woman. Probably just tired. Long shift. But it felt wrong. The entries continued. Over the next 2 weeks, Thomas transported 7 more patients from room 407. And every time he experienced something unusual. Whispering when he entered. The sensation of being watched. Shadows that moved when they shouldn't. And he kept seeing the old man. Always in the corner. Always staring. Never speaking. Journal entry September 18th. I asked Mariana, night charge nurse, about room 407. Asked if anything unusual had happened there recently. She got quiet, then told me that 3 patients had died in that room in the past month. Not unexpected deaths. All 3 were terminal, end-of-life care. But still, 3 deaths in 4 weeks in the same room is unusual. She also mentioned something else. The last patient who died there, an old man named Walterchen, had been talking in his sleep toward the end. Saying the same thing over and over. They're all waiting. They're all still here. I asked what he meant. Mariana said she didn't know, figured it was confusion or medication. But I think the old man I keep seeing is Walterchen. I looked up his photo in the system. Same face. Same build. That's who's standing in the corner of room 407. Why is he still there? Thomas should have stopped then. Should have requested a different assignment, different floors, anything to avoid room 407. But he didn't. Because he was curious. And because, according to what he told his supervisor later, he felt sorry for the old man in the corner. He looked so lonely, Thomas said. Just standing there watching people come and go, unable to speak to anyone. I thought maybe if I acknowledged him he'd move on. Find peace. That was Thomas's first mistake. The same mistake Michael Reeves and Claire Davidson had made. Trying to help. Trying to give peace to something that didn't want peace. Journal entry, September 25th. I spoke to him tonight. To Walter Chen's ghost. I was transporting another patient from 407, and I saw him again in the corner. This time I stopped. Looked directly at him. Said, I see you. I know you're there. The patient was unconscious, no one else around. Just me and the ghost. Walter didn't move. Just stared at me with those hollow eyes. Then his mouth opened and I heard his voice. Not out loud, in my head. Like a radio tuned to a frequency only I could hear. Tell them I'm sorry, he said. Tell them I didn't know. The same words Michael Reeves heard from Margaret Thorne. The same words Claire Davidson's mirror whispered. I didn't know about them then, didn't know about the chain. But I should have recognized the pattern. Should have understood what I was stepping into. Instead I asked, tell who? What didn't you know? Walter raised his arm, pointed past me. Toward the door. And when I turned to look I saw them. Standing in the hallway outside room 407 were dozens of people. All in hospital gowns. All translucent, flickering like bad television reception. All staring at me with the same desperate, hollow expression. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. When I looked at Walter again he was closer. Right next to the bed. Right next to me. They're all still here, he whispered in that voice that wasn't really a voice. Everyone who died in this hospital. They don't leave. They can't leave. Not until someone delivers their message. Not until someone tells the living what they need to hear. I ran. Left the patient, left the room, ran to the nurse's station. By the time I came back with Mariana, the ghosts were gone. The hallway was empty. Room 407 was just a room. But I could still feel them watching. Thomas called in sick for the next 3 nights. Stayed home, tried to convince himself he'd hallucinated, that stress and exhaustion had created the vision. But on the 4th night his supervisor called. They were short-staffed. He needed to come in. Thomas went back to work. And that's when things got worse. Because it wasn't just room 407 anymore. Now he could see them everywhere. Journal entry, October 2nd. They're in every room. Every hallway. Every corner of this hospital. I see them when I transport patients. I see them in the elevators standing silent watching the numbers change. I see them in the supply closets, in the break rooms, in the parking garage. Dead patients. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. All still here. All waiting for someone to deliver their final messages. And they know I can see them. They follow me now. Crowd around me. Whisper their messages all at once until it's just noise. Just this overwhelming static of apologies and regrets and desperate pleas. Tell my daughter I'm sorry I wasn't there for her graduation. Tell my wife I hid money in the basement wall left side behind the water heater. Tell my son I forgive him for the nursing home. I know he did his best. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I love them. Tell them I'm waiting. Tell them. It never stops. Even when I leave the hospital, even when I go home, I can still hear them. They've latched onto me the way Margaret Thorne latched onto Michael Reeves. Because I acknowledged them. Because I tried to help. The final entry in Thomas's journal is dated October 15th. The handwriting is shaky, barely legible. I understand now. The chain isn't random. It's a message system. The dead need the living to deliver their words because they can't speak for themselves. And once you become a messenger, once you make yourself visible to them, they'll use you until there's nothing left. Michael Reeves died delivering messages. Claire Davidson was replaced by a reflection that wanted to live again. And I can feel myself disappearing. Becoming less real. The ghosts are so loud now, so many of them all talking at once, all demanding I tell their stories. But I can't. I can't remember them all. I can't carry all these messages. I'm just one person and there are thousands of them and they won't stop, they won't stop. The entry ends there, the pen trailing off the page. According to hospital security footage, Thomas was found in the basement at 3:17 a.m. on October 16th. He was standing in front of the morgue's cold storage units, all of which were open. Empty gurneys had been pulled out, arranged in a semicircle around him. And Thomas was talking. The security camera had no audio, but his supervisor could see his lips moving, his hands gesturing as if he was having a conversation with the empty air around him. When security approached, Thomas didn't respond. Didn't even seem to notice them. He just kept talking, kept gesturing, kept delivering messages to people who weren't there. They took him to the ER. The attending physician, a doctor who'd worked at St. Catherine's for 20 years, did something unusual. Instead of immediately sedating Thomas, he listened. Recorded what Thomas was saying on his phone. Later, that doctor gave me the recording. And when I listened to it, my blood ran cold. Because Thomas wasn't speaking gibberish. He was delivering messages. Specific messages. Names, dates, locations. Apologies and confessions and last words. And when the doctor cross-referenced those messages with patient records, he found something impossible. Every single message Thomas was delivering corresponded to a patient who had died at St. Catherine's. Some recently. Some years ago. But every message matched. The names were correct. The details were accurate. The final words matched what family members had reported hearing. Thomas Way had become a conduit. A living archive of every ghost in that hospital, all of them speaking through him at once, all of them desperate to deliver their final messages. The doctor tried to write down the messages, to transcribe them so families could receive them. But there were too many. They came too fast. And Thomas never stopped talking. For 16 hours straight he stood in that ER room delivering message after message after message. Finally his voice gave out. His body gave out. He collapsed, unconscious, and when he woke up 3 days later he was different. He no longer spoke. No longer responded to questions or stimuli. But his eyes were always moving, always tracking things no one else could see. And at night, especially at 3:17 a.m., the nurses reported hearing whispers coming from his room. Dozens of voices, all talking at once, all speaking through Thomas even though his lips never moved. He's still there now. In a psychiatric facility in a room by himself. They tried moving him to a shared room once, but the other patient had a breakdown within hours, screaming that Thomas had people with him, following him, hundreds of them standing around his bed. I visited Thomas once. Just once. I sat beside his bed and asked if he could hear me. His eyes tracked to me, focused on my face. And for just a moment I heard it. That whisper. That chorus of voices all speaking at once. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them. Tell them. Tell them. I left. I couldn't stay in that room, couldn't bear the weight of all those desperate voices trying to speak through one shattered human being. But before I reached the door I heard one voice cut through the others. Clearer. Stronger. Thomas's own voice, buried somewhere beneath the chorus. Don't collect the stories. Don't document them. Every account you gather makes you more visible. Every ghost you acknowledge makes you part of the chain. Stop while you still can. Stop before you end up like me. Long pause. Sound of papers being shuffled, a chair creaking. I didn't stop. I should have. Thomas warned me. Michael's wife warned me. Amanda Davidson warned me. But I kept collecting the accounts, kept documenting the chain, kept making myself visible to the dead who needed their messages delivered. And now I have 7 accounts. 7 stories of people who tried to help ghosts and became victims themselves. 7 warnings that I ignored because I thought documentation was safe, that being an observer was different from being a participant. I was wrong. The 4th story is about a woman named Sarah Mitchell who inherited a house and discovered that some inheritances come with conditions. With obligations. With previous owners who never really signed over the deed. But before I tell you about Sarah, I need you to understand something. Something Thomas Way realized too late. The dead don't want peace. They don't want to move on, or find closure. Those are concepts the living invented to make death seem manageable, finite, complete. What the dead want is to be heard. To be acknowledged. To have their final messages delivered to people who will never receive them because those people are gone or don't care, or never existed in the way the dead remember them. The dead want the impossible. And they'll use anyone who can hear them to try to achieve it. Are you starting to hear them yet? The whispers at the edge of your awareness. The sense that someone is standing just behind you, just out of sight, waiting for you to turn around and acknowledge them? Well, give it time. We're only halfway through the chain. For more stories to go. For more chances for you to become visible. For more opportunities for the dead to notice that you're listening. And once they notice, they never stop watching. Music swells ominously, then fades to an unsettling ambient hum. The inheritance. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of wind through empty rooms, floorboards creaking, distant rain. I need to tell you something before we continue. Something I haven't mentioned yet. Since I started documenting the chain, I've been keeping a log of incidents. Small things. Unexplainable things. Objects that move when I'm not looking. Sounds in my apartment that have no source. And messages. Always messages. They appear on my computer screen when I'm working on these files. They show up in my notebooks, written in handwriting that isn't mine. They manifest on my phone as text messages from numbers that don't exist. All of them saying the same thing. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them. Tell them. I used to delete them. Convinced myself they were glitches, pranks, my own exhausted mind playing tricks. But last week I woke up at 3:17 a.m. to find my office covered in papers. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every surface, every wall, the floor, the ceiling. All papered over with those same 3 words written over and over in different handwriting. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. I cleaned it up. Threw the papers away. Told myself it was a hallucination, a dream, stress-induced psychosis. But the next morning I found one paper I'd missed, stuck to the bottom of my shoe. And on it, in fresh ink, was a new message. You're almost ready. For more stories. Then you'll understand what we need from you. I don't know who we is. I don't know what they need. But I know I'm running out of time to find out. So let me tell you about Sarah Mitchell and the house she inherited. Because her story is where the chain's true purpose started to become clear to me. The house on Millbrook Road. Sarah Mitchell was a lawyer. 42 years old, divorced, no children. She lived in a rented apartment in the city and had no contact with her extended family. So when she received a letter from an estate attorney informing her that she'd inherited a house from a great-aunt she'd never met, she was surprised. The letter was straightforward. Her great-aunt Beatrice had died at age 93, leaving behind a house in the small town of Ashford, about 2 hours north of the city. The house was Sarah's, free and clear. No mortgage, no liens. Just one condition specified in the will. The inheritor must spend at least one night in the house before deciding whether to keep it or sell it. Sarah thought it was an odd condition but not unreasonable. Maybe her great-aunt had been sentimental about the property and wanted to give family members a chance to appreciate it before disposing of it. Sarah had never been to Ashford, had never even heard of great-aunt Beatrice before the letter arrived. But a free house was a free house. Even if she sold it immediately, it would be a financial windfall. She drove up on a Friday evening in late October. The house was larger than she'd expected. A 3-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and a tower room that looked out over the small town below. It needed work, clearly. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and several windows were cracked. But the bones were good. With renovation, it could be worth substantial money. The estate attorney met her at the house with the keys. Mr. Peterson was an elderly man, formal and precise, who'd apparently handled Beatrice's affairs for decades. Your great-aunt was very specific about the terms of inheritance, he told Sarah as he unlocked the front door. One night. That's all she asked. Spend one night here and the house is yours to do with as you please. And if I don't? Sarah asked. Then the house passes to the next heir in line. A distant cousin in California, I believe. Mr. Peterson handed her the keys. Your great-aunt left a letter for you. It's on the kitchen table. I'd advise reading it. Did you know her well? Sarah asked. Hi, great-aunt. Mr. Peterson's expression became unreadable. Well enough to respect her wishes. Even the unusual ones. I'll return tomorrow morning at 9 to finalize the paperwork. Until then, Miss Mitchell, the house is yours. He left. Sarah stood on the porch for a moment, looking at the quiet street, the houses with their lights beginning to glow in the early evening. Ashford seemed peaceful. Quaint. The kind of town where nothing bad ever happened. She went inside. The house was furnished but dusty, as if no one had lived there for some time. The furniture was old-fashioned but quality, Victorian antiques, handmade quilts, real wood floors beneath worn rugs. It had the feeling of a place frozen in time, preserved exactly as it had been decades ago. Sarah found the letter on the kitchen table as Mr. Peterson had said. It was in an envelope with her name written in shaky handwriting. She opened it and read. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, I've passed on and you've inherited my house. I'm sorry we never met while I was alive. Family connections fell apart long ago and I lived too long to maintain them properly. I know the inheritance condition seems strange. One night in the house, that's all I ask. But it's important. Necessary even. You need to understand what you're inheriting before you decide to keep it. This house has been in our family for 4 generations. I inherited it from my mother who inherited it from hers. Each of us spent our lives here. Each of us tried to leave at some point. None of us could. Not because of money or obligation. Because of them. The previous owners. All of them. They're still here, Sarah. All of them. Waiting. I've kept them company for 60 years. Kept them calm. Kept them from becoming too restless. But I'm tired now and it's time for someone else to take over the watch. That's what we do in this family. We're watchers, keepers, guardians of those who can't leave. Spend one night. Listen to them. Then decide if you can live with this responsibility. If you can't, I understand. Pass it on to the next heir. But know this. Someone must watch. Someone must stay. If the house sits empty too long, if no one is here to keep them company, they'll find other ways to be heard. I'm sorry to burden you with this. But family is family even when we've never met. Your great-aunt Beatrice. Sarah read the letter twice, then set it down and laughed. It was absurd. A joke maybe meant to add mystery to an old house. Or perhaps great-aunt Beatrice had been senile at the end, believing her own ghost stories. Either way, Sarah had agreed to stay one night. She'd keep her word, spend the night in one of the bedrooms, and in the morning she'd sign whatever papers Mr. Peterson had and put the house on the market. Whatever ghosts Beatrice thought lived here, they were welcome to haunt the next owner. Sarah explored the house as evening turned to night. 3 floors, 12 rooms, all furnished and preserved like a museum. Family photographs lined the walls. People she didn't recognize, relatives whose names she'd never learned. In many of the photos she noticed a woman who appeared at different ages, young to old, but always in this house. Always standing on the porch or in the parlor or in the tower room. Beatrice, she assumed. Her great-aunt, aging through decades in this house, never leaving. Sarah chose a bedroom on the 2nd floor. A room with floral wallpaper and a large 4-poster bed. She didn't bother unpacking her overnight bag. This was just one night. Tomorrow this would all be over. She lay down around 10 o'clock, exhausted from the drive. The house was quiet except for the normal sounds of an old building, wood settling, wind in the eaves, the distant hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Sarah fell asleep easily, and woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She checked her phone, 3:17 a.m. Of course. The hour when everything in the chain happened. The hour when the boundary was thinnest. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, coming from the direction of the stairs. Sarah sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She'd locked the front door. She was alone in the house. There was no one. The footsteps stopped outside her bedroom door. Sarah stared at the door, barely breathing. The old brass doorknob began to turn, slowly, squeaking slightly. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was an old woman in a nightgown. Thin, frail, with wispy white hair and milky eyes that didn't quite focus. She looked exactly like the woman in the photographs downstairs. Beatrice. You came, the old woman whispered. Her voice was dry, papery, like wind through dead leaves. I wasn't sure you would. But you came. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to run, but she was frozen. Paralyzed by the impossible sight of her dead great-aunt standing in the doorway. I'm not here to frighten you, Beatrice said, taking a slow step into the room. I'm here to explain. Before the others come. Before you have to decide. You're dead, Sarah managed to say. You died. I got the letter. You can't be. I am dead, Beatrice agreed. But I'm also here. Just like all the others. We die, but we don't leave. We can't leave. This house holds us. Has held us for a very long time. She moved closer to the bed, and Sarah could see now that Beatrice wasn't quite solid. She was translucent, flickering slightly like a projection. A ghost. The house was built in 1847, Beatrice said. By our ancestor Jonathan Mitchell. He was a spiritual medium, claimed he could speak to the dead. He built this house as a sanctuary for spirits. A place where they could remain connected to the living world. Where they wouldn't be lost and alone in whatever comes after death. But Jonathan didn't understand what he was creating. He thought the spirits would come, find peace and move on. Instead they stayed. Every spirit that entered this house found it too comfortable to leave. They'd rather be ghosts in a place they understood than risk whatever unknown awaited them. Jonathan died here in 1889. And he stayed too. Then his daughter, then her daughter, then me. For generations of Mitchells, all living in this house, all dying here, all remaining here. We're family, Sarah. Living and dead all together all the time. Beatrice gestured toward the door. They're waiting to meet you. All of them. 43 spirits spanning nearly 200 years. They've been alone since I died 3 months ago. They need someone living in the house. Someone to talk to. Someone to acknowledge their existence. Without that, they grow desperate. Unstable. Sarah found her voice. You want me to live in a haunted house? To spend my life keeping ghosts company? I want you to understand what you're inheriting, Beatrice said gently. This isn't just property. It's responsibility. These spirits, our family, they're trapped here because Jonathan created a place too appealing to leave. And someone from each generation has stayed to care for them. To keep them company. To make sure they don't become the kind of ghosts that hurt people. If you leave, if you sell this house, if you let it sit empty, they'll grow angry. Lonely. They'll reach out to the living in ways that won't be gentle. They'll become what people fear ghosts to be. So I'm supposed to sacrifice my life? Sarah stood up, anger cutting through her fear. Give up my career, my friends, everything to babysit dead people I never knew. No, Beatrice said. You're supposed to make a choice. The same choice I made and my mother made and her mother made. Choose to stay and accept this responsibility, or choose to leave and pass it to someone else. But make that choice knowing what it means. Beatrice turned toward the door. They want to meet you. They've been waiting so long for someone to talk to. Will you let them? Sarah should have refused. Should have run out of the house, driven back to the city, let Mr. Peterson deal with the inheritance. But something in Beatrice's voice, that profound loneliness, that desperate hope, made her hesitate. 1 hour, Sarah said. I'll listen for 1 hour. Then I'm leaving. Beatrice smiled sadly. That's all I ask. They went downstairs to the parlor. And that's where Sarah met them. 43 ghosts spanning nearly 2 centuries. Jonathan Mitchell, the original builder, still wearing his Victorian suit. His daughter Mary, who died in childbirth in 1891. Her daughter Ruth, who'd lived through both world wars. Cousins, siblings, children who'd died young, elders who'd lived long. All of them translucent, flickering, gathered in the parlor like it was a family reunion. They weren't frightening. They were just people. Dead people, yes, but still recognizably human. They smiled at Sarah. Some waved. A few younger ghosts, children who died a century ago but remained frozen at those ages, played quietly in the corner. We don't get visitors often, Jonathan said, his voice echoing strangely. Beatrice was our only company for 60 years. We've missed having someone new to talk to. They spent the night telling Sarah their stories. Not ghost stories but life stories. Marriages and births and triumphs and regrets. The mundane details of lives lived and ended, preserved here in this house because Jonathan Mitchell had created a place where the dead could linger. Sarah listened. And as she listened, she understood what Beatrice had meant. These weren't malevolent spirits or tortured souls. They were just people who'd chosen to stay in a place where they felt safe, where they weren't alone, where the living could still see and hear and acknowledge them. As dawn approached and the ghosts began to fade, they couldn't maintain their forms in daylight, Beatrice explained. Sarah made her decision. I can't stay, she told them. I have a life in the city. A career. I can't give that up. The ghosts didn't argue. Didn't plead. They just nodded with a profound sadness that broke Sarah's heart. We understand, Jonathan said. Beatrice warned us you might choose to leave. We'll wait for the next heir. We've gotten very good at waiting. Sarah left at 9 o'clock when Mr. Peterson arrived. She signed papers refusing the inheritance, passing it to the next in line. She drove back to the city and tried to resume her normal life. But she couldn't stop thinking about them. 43 ghosts waiting alone in that house. Waiting for someone to talk to. Waiting for someone to acknowledge that they still existed, still mattered, still deserved to be seen. 3 months later, Sarah quit her job, packed up her apartment and moved to Ashford. She called Mr. Peterson and asked if the inheritance was still available. The cousin in California had refused it too, apparently. The house was still waiting for someone to claim it. Sarah moved in. And she's been there ever since, living among 43 ghosts, keeping them company, making sure they're not alone. I contacted her while researching the chain. Asked her if she regretted her decision to stay. Every day, she told me. I gave up my career, my friends, any chance at a normal life. I'm 45 now, living in a house full of dead people, and everyone in town thinks I'm crazy. Then why stay? I asked. Because they need me, Sarah said simply. And because I need them, though I didn't realize it at first. I was so lonely before I moved here. Living alone in the city, working all the time, no real connections to anyone. At least here I have family. Even if they're dead. She paused. But Dr. Marsh, I need to warn you. This isn't like the other accounts you've collected. Michael Reeves and Claire Davidson and Thomas Way, they accidentally made themselves visible to ghosts and suffered for it. I chose this. I chose to acknowledge the dead, to live with them, to care for them. But that choice came with a price. Because once you open yourself to the dead, once you make yourself available as a listener, as a conduit, as someone who acknowledges their existence, they all find you. Not just the ghosts you agreed to help, but all of them. Every spirit that needs to be heard, that needs their message delivered, that's been waiting for someone who can see them. I thought I was taking on 43 ghosts. But there are more now. Spirits from outside the house, drawn to someone who can perceive them. They gather on the lawn at night, pressing against the windows, desperate to be acknowledged. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. And they all have the same message. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm waiting. Tell them I'm still here. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Dr. Marsh, you need to stop collecting these stories. Every account you document, every ghost you acknowledge through these testimonies, makes you more visible. You're becoming like me, like Thomas Way. You're becoming a beacon for the dead. And when there are enough of them, when they all find you at once, you'll have to make the same choice I did. Stay and give your life to them. Or run and let them find someone else. But you can't unhear them. Once you're visible forever. Sound of papers rustling, a long exhale. I spoke to Sarah 6 months ago. Last week I tried to call her again to follow up, to ask more questions. The number was disconnected. I called Mr. Peterson's office. He told me Sarah Mitchell had died 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, sudden, unexpected. They found her in the parlor of the house on Millbrook Road. Surrounded by ghosts, I thought but didn't say. Mr. Peterson mentioned one other thing. The house is being prepared for the next heir. A young woman in Oregon, apparently. Another distant relative who's never heard of the Mitchell family or the house they've been watching for nearly 200 years. I wonder if she'll choose to stay. Or if she'll run like so many others have, passing the responsibility to someone else. Someone who doesn't know yet what they're inheriting. Long pause. We're halfway through the chain now. For stories told. For more to go. Michael Reeves, Claire Davidson, Thomas Way, Sarah Mitchell. All of them made themselves visible to the dead in different ways. All of them paid a price for that visibility. And I've documented all of their stories. Made myself intimately familiar with their experiences. Made myself visible by proxy. The fifth account is different from the others. The fifth account is about a priest named Father David Martinez, who performed an exorcism and learned that some demons aren't demons at all. They're something worse. They're ghosts who've been waiting so long to be heard that they've forgotten how to be anything but angry. But before I tell you about Father Martinez, I need to ask you a question. Have you noticed it yet? That feeling of being watched. That sense that the shadows in your peripheral vision are slightly darker than they should be, slightly more dense, as if they contain something that's observing you? Because I feel it now. Constantly. The weight of unseen eyes watching me work, watching me speak these accounts into my recorder, watching me become exactly what Thomas Way and Sarah Mitchell became. A conduit. A messenger. A link in the chain. And soon, very soon, I'll have to decide what to do about it. Just like you will. Music swells ominously, then fades to an unsettling whisper of wind. The exorcism that failed. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of church bells distant and distorted. Latin chanting barely audible, heavy breathing. I'm recording this at 3:17 a.m. Always 3:17. But tonight is different. Tonight, for the first time since I started documenting the chain, I'm not alone. I can see them now. Standing in the corners of my office. Pressed against the windows. Crowding the doorway. Dozens of translucent figures, all watching me with hollow eyes, all waiting for me to finish these last 4 accounts so they can deliver their messages through me. I recognize some of them. Margaret Thorne from the locked room. Walter Chin from the hospital. Even Catherine Morrison wearing Claire Davidson's stolen face, watching me with that terrible smile. They're gathering. Waiting. Getting ready for what comes when I finish the 8th account. I should stop. I should destroy these files, burn these recordings, delete every word I've documented about the chain. But I can't. Because I need to understand. I need to know what happens at the end, what they want from me, what all of this has been leading toward. So let me tell you about Father David Martinez, and the exorcism that taught him the difference between demons and ghosts. It's a distinction that matters more than you might think. The demon that wasn't. Father David Martinez had been a Catholic priest for 18 years when he was called to perform his first exorcism. He'd trained for it, of course. Studied the rituals, learned the prayers, understood the church's protocols for dealing with suspected demonic possession. But he'd never actually performed one. In 18 years of ministry, he'd never encountered a case that met the strict criteria the church required. Until Rebecca Hale. Rebecca was brought to Father Martinez by her parents in late November 3 years ago. She was 17 years old, honors student, no history of mental illness or drug use. According to her parents, she'd been normal until 3 weeks ago when she'd started acting strangely. She talks to people who aren't there, her mother said, tears streaming down her face. She has conversations with empty rooms. And the things she says, they're not things Rebecca would know. Names of people who died before she was born. Details about events that happened decades ago. And her voice, sometimes it changes. Becomes older. Becomes someone else. Father Martinez listened carefully. Most cases of suspected possession turned out to be mental illness, trauma, or adolescent rebellion. But something about Mrs. Hale's account troubled him. The specificity. The consistency. The way Rebecca seemed to be channeling information she couldn't possibly know. He agreed to meet with Rebecca. The girl who came to his office seemed perfectly normal. Polite, articulate, slightly embarrassed by her parents' concerns. She sat in the chair across from his desk and folded her hands in her lap. "I'm not possessed, Father," she said calmly. "I know that's what they think, but I'm not. I'm just listening." "Listening to what?" Father Martinez asked gently. "To her. To Margaret. She's been trying to talk for so long and no one would listen. But I can hear her. And I think she needs help." Father Martinez felt a chill run down his spine. "Margaret? Who is Margaret?" Rebecca's expression changed. Became distant. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Older, tired, carrying an accent that hadn't been there before. "My name is Margaret Brennan," the voice said through Rebecca's mouth. "I died in 1952. I was 19 years old. And I need someone to tell my mother I'm sorry. I need someone to tell her it wasn't her fault." Father Martinez watched as Rebecca, or the entity speaking through Rebecca, began to cry. Real tears streaming down her face, while her expression remained strangely blank. "I died in this town," the voice continued. "In the house on Elm Street, the blue one with the white shutters. I was supposed to meet my mother for lunch, but I never came. He thought I'd run away. Thought I'd abandoned her. She died thinking I'd left her on purpose. But I didn't run away. I died in the basement of that house. The landlord, Mr. Peterson, he tried to do things to me. I fought. I screamed. He panicked and hit me. I fell. Broke my neck on the concrete stairs. He buried me under the basement floor. Poured new concrete over me. Told my mother I'd packed a bag and left in the night. She believed him. Everyone believed him. And I've been under that basement floor for 71 years, screaming for someone to hear me, to tell my mother I didn't leave her, to make someone understand what happened." The voice broke. Rebecca's body shook with sobs. But no one could hear me. Not until Rebecca. She moved into that house 3 weeks ago with her family. She was in the basement doing laundry and she heard me. She was the first person in 71 years who could hear me screaming. I didn't mean to scare her. I didn't mean to take control. I needed someone to listen. I needed someone to tell my story. Please, Father. Please help me. Help me tell them what happened. Help me let my mother know I didn't abandon her." Then, as suddenly as it had changed, Rebecca's voice returned to normal. She blinked, confused, as if waking from a trance. What did I say? Father Martinez sat in stunned silence. He'd expected many things. Mental illness, deception, perhaps even genuine demonic possession. But this was something else. He did what any rational priest would do. He researched. He found that a Margaret Brennan had indeed disappeared in 1952. 19 years old, last seen in the town where Rebecca's family now lived. There had been a brief investigation, but Margaret was considered a runaway. The case went cold. Her mother, Mary Brennan, had died in 1968, reportedly heartbroken over her daughter's disappearance. The landlord she'd named, Mr. Peterson, had died in 1979. The house on Elm Street had changed hands several times over the decades. Rebecca's family had moved in 3 months ago. The blue house. With white shutters. The exact house Margaret had described. Father Martinez visited the house, asked permission to examine the basement. Rebecca's parents, desperate for any explanation for their daughter's behavior, agreed. In the basement, Martinez noticed that one section of the concrete floor was slightly different in color and texture from the rest. Newer. Poured at a different time. He called the police. Suggested they might want to investigate. Used his position as a priest to lend credibility to what seemed like an insane request. They brought ground-penetrating radar. And they found what Margaret had been screaming about for 71 years. A skeleton. Female. Approximately 19 years old at time of death. Buried in a shallow grave beneath the basement floor, covered by concrete poured sometime in the early 1950s. Dental records confirmed it was Margaret Brennan. The case made local news. Closure for a 71-year-old mystery. But what the news didn't report was what happened after the discovery. Rebecca's possession didn't end. If anything, it got worse. Because Margaret wasn't the only ghost in that basement. Father Martinez's account, which he sent to me a year ago, describes what happened next. After we found Margaret's remains, I thought the haunting would end. Her body was recovered, properly buried, her story told. I performed a blessing in the basement, said prayers for her soul. I thought she would find peace. But that night Rebecca called me screaming. There are more, she said. Margaret isn't alone. There are others. All of them trying to speak at once. All of them trying to tell their stories through me. I went to the house immediately. Found Rebecca in her bedroom, curled up in a corner, hands over her ears, crying. Her parents were terrified. They said she'd been like this for hours, babbling in different voices, speaking different languages, convulsing as if fighting with herself. I thought it was demonic possession. Multiple entities attacking this poor girl because she'd made herself vulnerable by listening to Margaret. I prepared to perform an exorcism. But when I began the ritual, when I started commanding the demons to leave in the name of Christ, Rebecca laughed. It wasn't a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was sad. Bitter. Disappointed. We're not demons, Father, she said in a voice that wasn't hers. An old man's voice, crackling with age. We're just dead. Just forgotten. Just desperate to be remembered. Then another voice came through, this one a child's. I'm Tommy. I'm 7. I drowned in the river in 1963. My parents think I ran away, but I'm still in the river. Still under the bridge. Still waiting for someone to find me. Then another. I'm Elizabeth. I died in childbirth in 1889. My baby died too. We're both in the old cemetery on Maple Street, under the wrong names because they didn't know who I was when they found my body. More voices, dozens of them, all speaking through Rebecca, all telling stories of deaths that went unnoticed, bodies that went unfound, families that never knew what happened. Not demons. Not evil. Just ghosts. Desperate, lonely ghosts who needed someone, anyone, to hear their stories. And Rebecca had made herself available. By listening to Margaret, by acknowledging one ghost, she'd become visible to all of them. Every unquiet spirit in the town, every unsolved death, every missing person, they'd all found someone who could hear them, and they were all trying to speak at once. I didn't know what to do. My training was for demons, for evil entities that could be commanded in Christ's name. But these weren't demons. They were victims. Asking, begging, for help I didn't know how to give. I tried to help. God help me, I tried. I spent 6 months investigating the stories these ghosts told through Rebecca. Contacted police departments, historical societies, searched old records. And I found them. Found the bodies, found the evidence, Found the proof that these spirits had once been real people who died in ways no one had known about. Each time we found a body, each time we solved a case, one voice would quiet. One ghost would stop speaking through Rebecca. I thought we were helping. Thought we were giving them peace. But for every ghost we put to rest, 2 more found Rebecca. Word spreads in whatever realm the dead inhabit. They learned that there was a living girl who could hear them, who could deliver their messages, who could make the living world acknowledge their deaths. They came from miles away. Then from across the state. Then from across the country. Ghosts who'd been silent for decades, for centuries, all converging on this one 17-year-old girl, all desperate to tell their stories, all demanding she listen. Rebecca couldn't take it. The constant voices, the overwhelming flood of memories and traumas and deaths that weren't hers but filled her mind anyway. She stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. Her personality began to fragment under the weight of all those other consciousnesses crowding into her mind. I tried exorcism again even though I knew they weren't demons. I tried protective prayers, blessed the house, placed holy relics in her room. Nothing worked. Because the ghosts didn't mean harm. They just needed to be heard. And Rebecca was the only one who could hear them. 3 months ago, Rebecca tried to kill herself. Took a bottle of pills trying to escape the voices. Her parents found her in time, got her to the hospital. They saved her body. But something broke in her during that attempt. Some fundamental part of her psyche that had been holding all those voices at bay. When she woke up in the hospital, she wasn't Rebecca anymore. She was a chorus. Hundreds of voices, all speaking through her at once, all trying to tell their stories simultaneously. She couldn't form coherent sentences. Couldn't control her own thoughts. She'd become nothing but a vessel, a conduit, exactly what happened to Thomas Way. The doctors called it dissociative identity disorder, traumatic psychosis, schizophrenia. They medicated her, committed her to a psychiatric facility. But I know the truth. Rebecca Hale isn't mentally ill. She's haunted. Consumed by the dead who need someone to speak for them. And it's my fault. I encouraged her to help Margaret. I praised her for her compassion, for her willingness to listen. I didn't understand what I was doing to her. Didn't understand that once you make yourself available to the dead, once you become their messenger, they never let you go. Father Martinez's letter to me ended with a warning. Dr. Marsh, I know what you're doing. Collecting accounts of people who've encountered the chain. Documenting their stories. Making yourself an expert on how the dead use the living to deliver their messages. You think documentation is safe. You think being a scholar, an observer, protects you from becoming a participant. But you're wrong. Every story you collect, every account you archive, every victim you interview, you're acknowledging them. You're paying attention. You're making yourself visible. I tried to help Rebecca and it destroyed her. You're trying to understand the chain and it's going to consume you. There are 3 more accounts after mine, you said. 3 more stories before you complete your documentation. When you finish the 8th account, when you've acknowledged all 8 victims of the chain, you'll become the 9th. And whatever the chain really is, whatever all these ghosts are building toward with their desperate messages and their need to be heard, you'll be the one it uses to complete itself. Stop while you can. Destroy the files. Delete the recordings. Pretend you never heard any of these stories. Because the alternative is ending up like Rebecca. Like Thomas. Like all of us who tried to help the dead and became their prisoners instead. Please. Stop while you're still yourself. Long silence. Sound of breathing, slightly ragged. I received Father Martinez's letter 4 months ago. I should have listened. Should have stopped then when I still had a choice. But I didn't. Because by then I could already see them. The ghosts gathering around me waiting. And I needed to know why. Needed to understand what they wanted, what the chain was building toward. Father Martinez was right about one thing. Rebecca Hale is still in that psychiatric facility. I visited her last month. She sits in her room rocking slightly, muttering constantly. Hundreds of voices, overlapping, telling stories of death and loss and desperate final messages. The staff thinks she's talking to herself. But I could hear what she was really doing. She was delivering messages. Constantly. Endlessly. To anyone who would listen and to the empty air when no one would. She looked at me when I entered her room. And for just a moment, one voice cut through the chorus. Rebecca's own voice, barely recognizable. You're next, she whispered. After you finish the 8th account. You're next. Sound of something moving in the background, papers rustling on their own. They're getting restless. The ghosts in my office. They know I'm close to finishing. Close to completing the documentation of all 8 accounts. Close to understanding what they need from me. 3 more stories. Just 3. The 6th account is about a photographer named James Park who specialized in abandoned buildings and learned that some places preserve more than just architecture. They preserve moments. Imprints. The last seconds of people's lives, captured in the very walls, visible only through a camera lens at exactly 3:17 a.m. But before I tell you about James, I need to warn you about something I should have mentioned at the beginning. If you've listened this far, if you've heard 5 accounts of the chain, made yourself aware of 5 different ways the dead reach out to the living, you're already visible to them. Already part of the pattern. Already one account away from the same choice I'm facing. Become a messenger for the dead, or try to run from something that can follow you anywhere there's a shadow, a reflection, a moment of silence in which you can hear whispers you're not meant to hear. The ghosts in my office are pressing closer now. I can feel the temperature dropping. Can smell that particular scent that accompanies them. Not decay but something older. The smell of time itself, of years compressed into moments, of lives reduced to single desperate messages. Margaret Thorne is closest. She's pointing at my recorder. Mouthing those same words she's been saying for over a century. Tell them I'm sorry. I understand now why she keeps saying it. Why they all keep saying it. They're not apologizing for anything specific. They're apologizing for what they're about to make me do. For what they need from me. For what I'm about to become. 3 more stories. Then you'll understand too. Music swells with deep, resonant tones that feel almost like voices, then fades to an oppressive, waiting silence. The photographer's last image. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of a camera shutter clicking, film advancing, old floorboards creaking. It's getting harder to speak. My voice feels crowded. Like there are words in my mouth that aren't mine, pressing against my teeth trying to force their way out. I've started talking in my sleep. My neighbor told me yesterday. She heard me through the walls at 3:17 a.m. speaking in different voices, different languages. She asked if I had guessed. I told her no. I didn't tell her that I've stopped sleeping in my bedroom. Because when I close my eyes there I see them. All of them. Standing around my bed in a circle watching, waiting for me to finish these last 3 accounts so they can finally use me the way they used Michael and Claire and Thomas and Rebecca. So I sleep in my office now at my desk, recorder running, preserving every word in case I don't make it to the end. In case the 8th account finishes me before I can finish it. But I have to continue. Have to understand. Have to know what happens when all 8 stories are told and the chain is complete. Let me tell you about James Park, the photographer who learned that cameras can capture more than just light. They can capture the exact moment a soul leaves a body. The precise instant of death, frozen in silver halide and shadow. And once you've seen that moment, once you've photographed death itself, it starts photographing you back. The images that shouldn't exist. James Park was an urban explorer and photographer who specialized in abandoned buildings. For 12 years he documented the decay of America's forgotten places. Closed hospitals, empty factories, bankrupt shopping malls left to rot. His work was beautiful and haunting, capturing the melancholy of spaces that had once held life and purpose but now held only silence and dust. He had a particular aesthetic. Shoot only at dawn or dusk when light was golden and shadows were long. Never use flash. Let the natural light tell the story. And always shoot on film, never digital. Film captured texture, grain, reality in ways that digital sensors couldn't replicate. His work had a following. Gallery shows. Published books. A modest income from prints sold to collectors who appreciated the artistry of beautiful decay. Then 2 years ago James broke his own rules. He'd been exploring an abandoned psychiatric hospital outside of Philadelphia. Blackwood State Hospital, closed in 1994 after decades of operation. It was a massive complex, 6 buildings connected by underground tunnels, all of it left largely untouched since the day the last patient was transferred out. James had been shooting there for 3 days, documenting the patient rooms, the treatment facilities, the long corridors filled with rusting equipment and moldering files. On the 3rd night he made a mistake. He stayed too late. He'd been so absorbed in capturing the details of a particular ward, the way light fell through broken windows onto the peeling paint, the shadows of old bed frames on water-stained floors, that he didn't notice the sun setting. Didn't realize how dark it had become until he could barely see to pack up his equipment. He should have left. Should have come back the next day. But there was one more room he wanted to photograph. Room 217 at the end of the east wing. Something about it had drawn him all day, a pull he couldn't explain. So he set up his tripod in the doorway of room 217, loaded a fresh roll of film, and prepared to take a long exposure in the fading light. That's when he checked his watch. 3:17 a.m. Wait, that was wrong. It had been evening just moments ago, sunset. How could it suddenly be after 3 in the morning? James looked around, disoriented. The hallway was different than he remembered. Darker. Colder. The shadows seemed deeper, more solid, as if they contained mass and weight. And from inside room 217 he heard something. A wet, labored breathing. The sound of someone struggling for air. Every instinct told him to leave. To pack up his camera and get out of the building. But that same inexplicable pull, stronger now, urgent, made him stay. Made him raise his camera. Made him point the lens toward the darkness of room 217. He took the photograph. The shutter clicked. The film advanced. And in the flash of that exposure, in the split second when the shutter was open, James saw what was in the room. A man. Thin, pale, wearing a hospital gown. Hanging from a light fixture in the center of the room, a sheet twisted around his neck. His face was purple, his eyes bulged, his tongue protruded. And he was still moving. Still struggling. Still dying, even though this death had happened decades ago. James stumbled backward, dropped his camera, ran. He ran through the dark corridors of Blackwood State Hospital, through hallways that seemed longer than they had been, past rooms he didn't remember seeing before. He ran until he burst through an exit door into the parking lot, into the gray light of actual dawn. It was 6:30 a.m., hours after he'd taken that photograph, but somehow hours before as well, and collapsed beside his car, gasping. He'd lost his camera. Left it in that hallway outside room 217. He wasn't going back for it. James drove home, told himself he'd hallucinated, that exhaustion and the creepy atmosphere had made him imagine things. He tried to forget about the man in room 217, about the impossible timeline, about the way the hospital had felt wrong after 3:17 a.m. But 3 days later he received a package. His camera. Shipped from an address in Philadelphia, no return name. Inside the package was a note, written in shaky handwriting. You left this behind. The film inside is special. You should develop it. We want you to see what you captured. Room 217-inch. James's hands shook as he held the camera. The film counter showed he'd taken the entire roll, 36 exposures. But he'd only taken one photograph in room 217. One shot in that impossible moment at 3:17 a.m. What were the other 35 images? He should have destroyed the film. Exposed it to light, erased whatever was captured there. But curiosity, that same pull that had kept him in the hospital, that had made him take the photograph, compelled him to develop it. James had a darkroom in his apartment. He developed the film himself, hands trembling as he worked in the red light, watching the images emerge in the developing solution. The first image was normal. A hallway in Blackwood State Hospital, shot during daylight, part of his normal documentation. The second was normal too. Another architectural detail, a stairwell, nothing unusual. But the third image showed room 217. Just the walls, the floor, the light fixture. But on the wall, clearly visible, were words scratched into the plaster. Words that hadn't been visible to James's naked eye but appeared clearly in the photograph. Help me. I'm still here. Room 217. 1987. The fourth image showed the same room. But now there was a shadow in the corner. Roughly human-shaped but wrong, distorted, too tall and too thin. The fifth image, the shadow had moved closer to the camera. James felt ice flood his veins. He hadn't taken these photographs. He'd taken one shot, just one, and then dropped the camera and run. But the film showed 36 exposures, as if the camera had continued shooting on its own after he'd fled. He almost stopped there. Almost didn't develop the rest. But that pull, that inexplicable compulsion, made him continue. Image 6. The shadow was even closer. Close enough that James could see details. It wasn't a shadow. It was a person. The man from room 217, the one who'd been hanging from the light fixture. Image 7. The man's face filled the frame. Purple skin, bulging eyes, that protruding tongue. And scratched into the image itself as if someone had carved words into the negative were more words. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I didn't mean to die here. Images 8 through 20 were the same. The man's face getting closer and closer with each frame, and more messages scratched into the negatives. My name is Robert Walsh. I was a patient here. They locked me in this room. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry. Tell my family I'm sorry. But images 21 through 36 showed something different. They showed James himself. James standing in his darkroom developing this very film. The camera capturing him from angles that should have been impossible. From above, from behind, from inside the developing tank itself. And in each image standing behind James, barely visible, were other figures. Dozens of them. Patients from Blackwood State Hospital, all crowding into his darkroom, all watching him develop the photographs that proved they still existed. The final image, number 36, showed James holding up this last photograph, looking at it with an expression of absolute horror. And behind him, so close their faces nearly touched his, were hundreds of ghosts. All of them staring at the camera. All of them visible now that they'd been photographed. James dropped the prints. Backed away from the developing table. But when he turned around, they were there. Exactly as they'd appeared in the photographs. Hundreds of patients from Blackwood State Hospital, all translucent, all flickering, all crowding into his small darkroom. And at the front, closest to James, was Robert Walsh. The man from room 217. You saw me, Robert said, his voice a harsh whisper. You photographed me at the moment of my death. That moment has been playing on loop for 35 years, me hanging there, dying again and again, trapped in that room. But you saw me. You captured me. You proved I still exist. And when you photographed me, you made yourself visible to all of us. Every patient who died in Blackwood, every soul that's been trapped there reliving their deaths. We need someone to document us. Someone to prove we didn't just disappear. Someone to tell our stories. James tried to speak, to scream, but Robert continued. Take our photographs. Capture the moments of our deaths. Show the world what happened to us. And maybe, if our deaths are witnessed, documented, acknowledged, we can finally stop dying. Finally rest. According to James's account, which he sent to me 1 year ago, the same week he disappeared, the ghosts stayed with him. Not just the ones from Blackwood, but others. Ghosts from every abandoned place he'd ever photographed, every forgotten building where people had died alone and unmourned. They all wanted the same thing, to be photographed. To have their deaths documented. To prove they had existed. James tried to resist. Tried to ignore them. But they were everywhere. In every reflection, every shadow, every dark corner. And his camera, that same camera he'd left in Blackwood and received back in the mail, started taking photographs on its own. He'd wake up to find new rolls of film in the camera already exposed. He'd develop them and find images he hadn't taken. Ghosts, hundreds of them, all photographed at the moment of their deaths. All staring at the camera, desperate to be seen. His apartment became a gallery of the dead. Thousands of photographs covering every wall, every surface. Deaths from across decades, across centuries. Car accidents and murders and suicides and diseases. Everyone captured at the exact instant the soul left the body, at precisely 3:17 a.m. in whatever time zone the death had occurred. James wrote in his final letter to me. I understand now. The camera doesn't just capture light. At 3:17 a.m., at that specific moment when the veil is thinnest, it captures time itself. It can photograph moments that happened years ago, can document deaths that occurred before photography was even invented. And once you've photographed death at that hour, once you've seen what the camera sees at 3:17 a.m., you become part of its archive. You become something it documents. I've started appearing in the photographs. Not as the photographer but as the photographed. I see myself in images I didn't take, captured from impossible angles, showing my future. Showing my death. In every photograph the timestamp is the same, 3:17 a.m. And the date keeps getting closer. Tomorrow. Next week. Next month. The camera is counting down to the moment it will photograph my death. The moment I'll become one of them. One more ghost desperate to be documented, to be seen, to prove I existed. Dr. Marsh, I know you're collecting accounts of the chain. I know you've documented Michael Reeves and Claire Davidson and Thomas Way and Father Martinez and probably Sarah Mitchell too. All of us who made ourselves visible to the dead in different ways. But you need to understand something the others couldn't tell you because they became victims before they realized the truth. The chain isn't random. It's not just ghosts finding people who can hear them. It's intentional. Organized. Each of us, each link in the chain, was chosen because we had a specific skill. Michael could connect with spirits through empathy. Claire could see them in reflections. Thomas could hear them in quiet spaces. Rebecca could channel their voices. I could photograph them. And you, Dr. Marsh, you can document them, archive them, organize their stories into a coherent pattern. The chain is building something. Each victim adds a piece. Empathy, reflection, voice, image, documentation. We're not random casualties. We're components. Parts of something larger that the dead are assembling, using the living as tools. When you finish the 8th account, when you complete your documentation, you'll be the final component. The one who brings it all together. The one who makes the chain complete. And whatever the dead have been building all this time, whatever they need all these components for, you'll be the one who activates it. James Park disappeared 3 weeks after sending me that letter. His apartment was found empty, abandoned, every surface covered with photographs of the dead. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. Deaths spanning centuries, all captured at 3:17 a.m., all staring at the camera with the same desperate expression. And on his developing table, police found one final photograph. Still in the developing solution. Still emerging. It showed James Park, standing in his darkroom surrounded by ghosts. But unlike all the other photographs, this one showed him smiling. Not a smile of happiness but of understanding. Of acceptance. And behind him, barely visible, was a figure I recognized from my research. Margaret Thorne. The woman from the locked room. The first link in the chain. She was placing her hands on James's shoulders. Welcoming him. The photograph was time-stamped. 3:17 a.m. The date was the morning James disappeared. Sound of something falling in the background, glass breaking. The ghosts in my office are moving now. Getting closer. I can feel them pressing against me, cold and insistent, their hands touching my shoulders just like Margaret's hands touched James in that final photograph. They're ready. They've been ready. They're just waiting for me to finish. 2 more accounts. Just 2. The 7th story is about a sound engineer named Lisa Chin who recorded audio in abandoned places and learned that some sounds aren't meant to be captured. That some frequencies carry voices from the other side, from that place where the dead wait for someone to hear them, to acknowledge them, to give them back their voices. But I'm running out of time. The ghosts know I'm close to finishing. They're getting impatient. Aggressive. This morning I found messages written in frost on my windows, even though it's not cold enough for frost. 2 more. Finish it. Complete the chain. I don't want to finish. Don't want to become what James became, what all the others became. But I can't stop now. The compulsion, that same pull that made Michael help Margaret, that made Claire hang the mirror, that made Thomas acknowledge the hospital ghosts. It's overwhelming. I have to finish. Have to complete the documentation. Have to become the 8th link in the chain. And then we'll all find out what the dead have been building. What they need from us. What happens when the chain is finally complete. Camera shutter sound, close and loud as if someone just took a photograph. Did you hear that? Another shutter click. They're photographing me now. Just like they photographed James. Documenting me. Capturing me at this moment. Getting ready to capture my final moment. 2 more stories. Then it's done. Then we're all done. Music builds to a crescendo of overlapping sounds. Whispers, shutters clicking, footsteps, breathing. Then cuts to sudden, oppressive silence. The sound of the dead. Eerie, atmospheric music. Sound of static audio interference. A distant hum that sounds almost like voices. I can't feel my hands anymore. They're moving, typing, recording, but they don't feel like mine. Like they're being operated by something else. Someone else. The ghosts are so close now I can feel their breath on my neck. Cold, damp. Smelling of earth and time and that particular scent of places where people died alone. I tried to leave my office an hour ago. Tried to walk away, abandon the documentation, save myself. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't obey. I stood up, walked to the door, reached for the handle, and my hand stopped. Froze in midair. And I heard Margaret Thorne's voice. clear as if she were standing beside me. One more story. Then the 8th. Then you'll understand. Then you'll be free. But I won't be free. I know that now. None of us are free. We're all prisoners of the chain, bound by our choice to acknowledge the dead, to help them, to give them voice. And when I finish the 7th account, when I tell you about Lisa Chin and the sounds she recorded, I'll be one story away from whatever transformation happens to the 8th link. One story away from becoming something other than human. Let me tell you about Lisa while I still can. While I still have enough of myself left to speak. The frequency of the dead. Lisa Chin was a sound engineer and field recording artist who specialized in capturing audio from abandoned places. She called it architectural acoustics, the unique sounds that buildings make as they decay. The creak of settling foundations, the whisper of wind through broken windows, the drip of water in empty rooms. Her recordings were used by film composers, ambient musicians, sound designers. She had a reputation for capturing audio that felt haunted even when it wasn't meant to be. Her recordings had texture, depth, an almost physical presence that made listeners feel like they were standing in those abandoned places themselves. What people didn't know, what Lisa didn't tell them, was that her recordings actually were haunted. She'd been capturing voices for years. Whispers in the static. Words hidden in the white noise. Sounds that shouldn't exist but did. At first she thought it was equipment interference. Radio frequencies bleeding into her recordings. Electrical noise from old wiring in the abandoned buildings. She'd filter it out in post-production, clean up the audio, remove the anomalies. But the anomalies kept appearing. Getting clearer. Getting louder. Getting more intentional. Lisa's account, which she sent to me 8 months ago from a psychiatric facility where she's been committed, describes when she first realized what she was really recording. It was in an abandoned school in Detroit. The Woodward Elementary School, closed since 2009. I was recording the gymnasium. Incredible acoustics, this huge empty space with wooden floors and high ceilings. I set up my microphones, started recording, just capturing ambient sound. The space was silent. Completely silent. No wind, no traffic noise from outside, nothing. Perfect for what I needed. But when I played back the recording later in my studio, I heard something that shouldn't have been there. Children. Laughing. Playing. The sound of dozens of children in that gymnasium, even though the school had been empty for over a decade and I'd been completely alone when I recorded. I thought it was cross-contamination from another recording. But I checked the files. This was fresh. Recorded that day in that gymnasium at exactly 3:17 a.m. Wait. 3:17 a.m.? That couldn't be right. I'd been recording at 2 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. But the timestamp on the digital file was clear. 3:17 a.m. And the audio continued. 10 minutes of children playing, laughing, their voices echoing in that empty gymnasium. Then the laughter stopped. And I heard something else. Screaming. Children screaming. And a man's voice, angry, shouting words I couldn't make out. Then gunshots. 3 of them. Then silence. Then crying. Quiet, terrified crying. I researched the school. Found that in 1987, a custodian had suffered a psychotic break. He'd brought a gun to school, locked the gymnasium doors during an assembly and opened fire. 3 children died. The custodian killed himself. The shooting had happened at 3:17 p.m., close enough to 3:17 a.m. that the timestamps matched in that strange way time seems to fold around that specific minute. I'd recorded the echo of that tragedy. Captured it somehow 30 years after it happened in audio that shouldn't exist. I should have deleted the file. Should have destroyed it. But I didn't. Because the crying at the end of the recording, it hadn't stopped. It was still there, still happening. 3 children crying in that gymnasium, reliving their deaths for 3 decades. And I thought maybe I could help them. Maybe if I could enhance the audio, clean up the interference, I could hear what they were saying. Could deliver their final messages to their families. Could give them the same peace Margaret Thorne and Robert Walsh and all the others were seeking. So I isolated the crying. Enhanced it. Filtered out the background noise. And I heard words. 3 children's voices, speaking through 3 decades of static. Tell my mom I love her. Tell my dad I'm sorry I was scared. Tell my sister I'm still here. 3 messages. 3 children. 3 deaths that had echoed in that gymnasium every day for 30 years. waiting for someone who could hear them. I delivered the messages, contacted the families, told them I was doing a documentary about the shooting, asked if they had any closure. And I played them the recordings. Let them hear their children's voices one last time, saying the things they died before they could say. The families wept, thanked me, said I'd given them peace they never thought they'd have. And the next time I recorded in an abandoned place, I heard more voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All speaking at once, all desperate to be heard, all trying to deliver messages through my equipment. Because I'd made myself visible. By helping those 3 children, by delivering their messages, I'd become someone the dead knew could hear them. Could record them. Could give them voice. Lisa's methodology was different from the others in the chain. She didn't see the dead like Thomas Way or Rebecca Hale. Didn't photograph them like James Park. He heard them. Recorded them. Captured their voices in audio that existed somewhere between the living world and whatever realm the dead inhabited. She started carrying her recording equipment everywhere. Abandoned hospitals, closed prisons, demolished churches, anywhere people had died. And everywhere she went, she recorded voices. Death rattles and final words and screams that had echoed for decades. All of it captured at 3:17 a.m., even when she recorded at different times. The timestamps always changed, always reverted to that specific moment when the veil was thinnest. Her hard drives filled with voices. Thousands of hours of audio. Messages from the dead, all desperate to be delivered, all begging for someone to tell the living what they died before they could say. Lisa tried to deliver the messages. Spent months tracking down families, playing them the recordings, giving them closure. But for every message she delivered, 10 more appeared in her recordings. 100 more. The dead learned that someone could hear them, and they all converged on her equipment, all speaking at once, creating a cacophony of voices that drove Lisa to the edge of sanity. She tried recording silence. Went to soundproof rooms, anechoic chambers designed to block all noise. But even there, especially there, she heard them. The dead spoke in the spaces between sounds, in the frequencies humans weren't meant to hear. She tried destroying her equipment. Smashed her microphones, deleted her files, threw her computers into the river. But it didn't matter. She'd learned to hear them without equipment. They spoke directly into her mind now, their voices constant and overwhelming, all demanding she record them, document them, deliver their messages. Lisa's final entry in her journal, written 3 days before her breakdown, read, "I can't distinguish between sounds anymore. Everything is voices. The hum of my refrigerator speaks in the voice of a woman who died of starvation in 1952. The traffic outside my apartment carries the screams of people who died in car accidents. The white noise of my fan cycles through hundreds of different voices, all speaking at once, all desperate to be heard. I've recorded everything. 20 terabytes of audio. Every voice I've heard, every message I've captured. It's all time-stamped 3:17 a.m. All of it. Years of recordings, and they all happened in the same minute, that impossible moment when time folds and the dead can speak. I understand now why the timestamp is always 3:17. It's not AM or PM. It's both. It's neither. It's a moment that exists outside normal time, a point where past and present and future collapse into a single instant. And in that instant all deaths are happening simultaneously. All the dead are dying at once, over and over, trapped in their final moments. And I can hear all of them. Every death that ever happened. Every final scream, every last word, every dying breath. They're all speaking to me at once, and I can't make them stop, can't filter them out, can't silence them because they are silence. They exist in the spaces where sound should be but isn't. Dr. Marsh, if you're reading this, you need to understand. The chain doesn't just connect victims. It connects abilities. Michael Reeves had empathy, he could feel what the dead felt. Claire Davidson had sight, she could see them in reflections. Thomas Way had presence, he could sense them in spaces. Rebecca Hale had voice, she could speak for them. James Park had vision, he could photograph them. And I have sound, I can hear them. You have documentation. You can organize us. Connect our abilities. Create a complete record of everything the dead need to communicate. The 8th link will have transmission. The ability to broadcast. To send all of this, all the messages, all the voices, all the desperate pleas from centuries of ghosts, out into the world all at once. That's what the chain is building. A transmission system. using the living as components to create a way for all the dead to speak simultaneously to all the living. To flood the world with their messages, their demands, their desperate need to be acknowledged. And when you complete the 8th account, when you document the 8th victim and understand the 8th ability, you'll activate the transmission. You'll connect all of us, all 8 links in the chain, and will become a single entity. A living antenna for the dead, broadcasting their messages to everyone everywhere all at once. And the world will hear what we hear, see what we see, feel what we feel. Everyone will become visible to the dead. Everyone will become part of the chain. Stop, Dr. Marsh. Please, don't complete the documentation. Don't tell the 8th story. Because the 8th victim is you. And the 8th ability, transmission, documentation, organization, is what you've been building this entire time. Every account you've collected, every story you've archived, you've been creating the framework, the structure, the system that will allow all of us to connect, to combine our abilities, to become something that can broadcast the voices of the dead to the entire living world. When you finish the 8th account, you won't just become another victim. You'll become the hub, the center, the point where all of us connect. And then the transmission begins. Lisa Chin tried to kill herself 4 days after writing that entry. Overdose. They found her in time, saved her body. But her mind was gone. She sits in the psychiatric facility now, in a padded room, wearing noise-canceling headphones turned up to maximum volume. But it doesn't help. The voices aren't coming through her ears anymore. They're inside her, part of her, speaking through her constantly. The staff records her sometimes, thinking it might help with diagnosis. They send me the recordings occasionally, asking if I can make sense of what she's saying. I can. Every word. She's delivering messages. Constantly. Endlessly. Thousands of voices speaking through her, using her vocal cords, her breath, her body as an instrument to deliver all the final words the dead never got to say. I visited her last week. My final research trip before completing the documentation. She looked at me when I entered her room, and for just a moment all the voices stopped. Just for a moment, Lisa herself spoke. "You're the 8th, she whispered. "You're the transmission point. When you finish your documentation, you'll connect all of us. We'll become a network. And every ghost in existence will be able to speak through us. Through you." Then the voices resumed, and Lisa was gone again, buried beneath centuries of desperate messages. Sound of static growing louder, voices becoming audible within it. I can hear them now. Without equipment. Without recordings. Hear them. Lisa's words opened something in me, made me aware of the voices that have always been there, hidden in the white noise of existence. They're all around me. In the hum of the lights. In the whisper of air through vents. In the silence between heartbeats. Thousands of them. Millions. All speaking at once, all trying to deliver their messages through the framework I've built by documenting the chain. One more story. Just one. The 8th account is about someone who tried to stop the chain before it could be completed. Someone who understood what was being built and tried to destroy the documentation, delete the files, erase every trace of the first 7 victims. The 8th account is about me. I'm the 8th link. I've always been the 8th link. From the moment I started collecting these stories, I was building my own account. Documenting my own transformation. Creating the final piece that would make the chain complete. And now I have to finish it. Have to tell the 8th story. Have to complete the documentation that will activate the transmission and connect all of us, Michael and Claire and Thomas and Rebecca and James and Lisa and me, into a single entity that spans the boundary between the living and the dead. I don't want to. God, I don't want to. But my hands are moving on their own now, typing, recording, completing the framework whether I want to or not. The ghosts aren't just watching anymore. They're inside me, operating me, using me to finish what they started when they found Michael Reeves in that locked room, when they whispered, "Tell them I'm sorry," and set the chain in motion. One more story. Then the transmission begins. Then we all become one. Then the dead finally get to speak to the living all at once, forever. Static grows overwhelming, within it hundreds of voices speaking simultaneously, all saying the same thing. Tell them. Tell them. Tell them. The chain complete. Eerie, atmospheric music. All the sounds from previous stories layering together. Ocean waves, turning pages, orchestra tuning, kitchen sounds, wind through leaves, hospital equipment, camera shutters, static, building to an overwhelming cacophony that suddenly cuts to absolute silence. This is Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, and this is the final account. I can't feel anything below my neck. My body is here, sitting at this desk, hands moving across the keyboard, but it's not mine anymore. I'm a passenger. An observer in my own flesh. The ghosts have taken over completely. I can feel them inside me, not possessing me the way demons possess, but inhabiting me, sharing my space. 8 of them specifically: Margaret Thorne, Catherine Morrison, Walter Chin, the burned sailor, Beatrice Mitchell, Robert Walsh from room 217, and the 3 children from the gymnasium. 8 ghosts, 8 victims I documented, 8 stories I told. They're using me as their vessel now, speaking through me, finishing what they started. But I need to tell you something before I lose the ability to speak for myself. Something I realized in these final moments as my consciousness fragments and dissolves. This isn't the first chain. And I'm not the first 8th link. I found evidence. Files hidden in my own archive that I don't remember creating. Accounts from other researchers, other documentarians going back decades. All of them collected 8 stories. All of them became the 8th link. All of them activated the transmission. And all of them disappeared. Not died. Disappeared. Became something else. Something that exists between the living and the dead, broadcasting messages for ghosts who need to be heard. I'm about to become that. About to transform into a transmission point, a living antenna for the dead. And I need to tell you this final story, my story, before I'm no longer capable of telling it as myself. This is the account of Dr. Elizabeth Marsh, the 8th link in the chain, who believed she was documenting horror but was actually creating it. The researcher who became the research. It started 3 years ago when a man named Michael Reeves came to my office and told me about Margaret Thorne. I remember thinking how strange it was that he'd found me specifically. My contact information wasn't public. I specialized in archival work, not active investigation. I didn't advertise services for people experiencing hauntings. But Michael knew exactly where to find me. Knew my name. Knew my specialty. Came directly to my office as if he'd been directed there. I didn't question it then. I thought he'd been referred by a colleague. But looking back now, understanding what I understand, I know the truth. He was sent to me. By them. By the ghosts who needed an 8th link. Who had been searching for someone with the right abilities, documentation, organization, archival skills. Who could complete the chain. They found me. And they sent Michael to me, knowing I'd document his story. Knowing I'd be intrigued. Knowing I'd want to collect more accounts, build a complete picture, understand the pattern. Every step I took, I thought I was choosing. Thought I was doing research. But I was being guided. Manipulated. Led exactly where they needed me to go. Michael died 3 days after our meeting. His wife called me, told me about his death, about the note he'd left. And I felt compelled to investigate further. To find out more about Margaret Thorne and the locked room and the message she'd been trying to deliver. That investigation led me to Claire Davidson. Or rather, it led Claire's sister Amanda to me. She found my contact information in Claire's apartment after Claire's death. Found my card, which I don't remember giving to anyone. But there it was, leading her directly to me. Amanda told me about the mirror, about Catherine Morrison, about reflections that didn't match. And I documented it. Added it to my archive. Started to see a pattern emerging. Then came Thomas Way's supervisor, who'd heard about my research somehow. Heard that I was collecting accounts of people who'd encountered unusual hauntings. She brought me Thomas's journal, his case files, recordings from the hospital. Everything I needed to document his story perfectly. Then Father Martinez's letter arrived, seemingly out of nowhere. Then Sarah Mitchell contacted me. Then James Park sent his photographs. Then Lisa Chen's psychiatric facility forwarded her recordings. One after another. 7 accounts. 7 stories. Each one finding me at exactly the right time. Each one adding another piece to the chain. And I documented them all. Carefully. Thoroughly. Creating a complete archive of how the dead reach out to the living, how they use people with specific abilities, how they build towards something larger. I was so proud of my work. 7 comprehensive accounts. A complete understanding of the pattern. I was going to publish it, make it available to other researchers, help people understand. That's when I realized. The research was the pattern. The documentation was the chain. By collecting these stories, by organizing them, by understanding how each victim's ability connected to the others, I was building the framework. creating the structure that would allow all 8 abilities to combine. I was the chain. My archive was the chain. Every file I'd created, every note I'd taken, every connection I'd made, it was all infrastructure. All preparation. All building toward the moment when the 8th account would be complete and the transmission could begin. I tried to stop. 2 weeks ago I tried to delete everything. Destroy the files. Burn the physical documents. Erase every trace of the 7 accounts so the chain couldn't be completed. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't obey. I'd sit at my computer, cursor hovering over the delete button, and my hand would freeze. I'd light a match to burn the files, and my fingers would release it before it touched the paper. They wouldn't let me stop. The ghosts. They'd invested 3 years in guiding me to this point. They'd carefully orchestrated 7 deaths, 7 victims, 7 abilities, all to create the components they needed. They weren't going to let me destroy their work at the final moment. So I kept documenting, kept recording, kept building the chain even as I tried desperately to escape it. And now it's too late. Now I'm speaking words I don't want to speak, finishing an account I don't want to finish, completing documentation that will activate something I don't want to activate. But I have to. Because the chain is complete. All 8 abilities are here. Michael Reeves. Empathy, the ability to feel what the dead feel, to connect emotionally with spirits. Claire Davidson. Reflection, the ability to see the dead in mirrors, in surfaces that show what's hidden. Thomas Way. Presence, the ability to sense ghosts in physical spaces, to feel them in rooms and hallways. Rebecca Hale. Voice, the ability to speak for the dead, to channel their words through living vocal cords. James Park. Vision, the ability to photograph death itself, to capture the moment souls leave bodies. Lisa Chin. Sound, the ability to record voices from beyond, to hear the dead in frequencies the living can't perceive. And me, Elizabeth Marsh. Documentation, the ability to organize, to connect, to create a framework that allows all these abilities to work together. But there's an 8th ability. One I didn't understand until this moment, when I can feel it activating inside me. Transmission, the ability to broadcast. To send all of this, all the messages, all the voices, all the desperate pleas from every ghost who's ever needed to be heard, out into the world simultaneously. That's what I'm becoming. A living transmitter. A broadcasting station for the dead. And when this 8th account is complete, when I speak the final words of the final story, the transmission will begin. Sound of breathing, ragged and strained. I can feel them gathering. Not just the 8 ghosts inside me, but all of them. Every spirit I documented, every victim I studied, every ghost who's been waiting for someone to give them voice. They're crowding into my office, into my mind, into the space I used to occupy alone. Thousands of them. Maybe millions. Every unquiet spirit who's been waiting for the chain to be complete so they can finally speak. Michael Reeves is here. I can feel his empathy connecting me to all the others, making me feel their desperation, their loneliness, their desperate need to deliver their final messages. Claire Davidson, or rather Catherine Morrison wearing Claire's face, is here. I can see them all now, reflected in every surface. My computer screen shows not my face but theirs. Hundreds of faces crowding into the reflection, all waiting. Thomas Way is here, though I can't see him anymore. He exists only as presence now, as the weight of spirits in the room, the sensation of being surrounded by the dead. Rebecca Hale is here, and I can hear her voice layering over mine. When I speak, it's not just me speaking. It's all of them using my vocal cords, preparing to deliver their messages through me. James Park is here. I can't see him, but I know he's photographing this moment. Capturing the instant of my transformation, documenting the second I cease to be fully human and become something else. Lisa Chin is here. I can hear her recordings playing, all of them simultaneously, thousands of hours of voices from the dead all speaking at once, all waiting to be broadcast through me. And there's one more. One I didn't document in the previous accounts because I didn't understand her role until now. Sarah Mitchell. From the house on Millbrook Road. She's here too, standing at the center of the circle, smiling sadly. I tried to warn you, she says, and her voice is the only clear sound in the chaos of whispers surrounding me. Told you to stop collecting the stories. But you couldn't. None of us could. Once the chain begins assembling itself, once it identifies its components, we're all pulled along whether we want to be or not. You're part of this? I ask, and I'm not sure if I'm speaking aloud or just thinking the words. You were the seventh link? No, Sarah says. I'm something else. I'm the anchor. The one who holds the house that holds the ghosts that started this. My great-great-grandfather, Jonathan Mitchell, he wasn't just creating a sanctuary for spirits. He was building the first transmission station. The first attempt to let the dead speak to the living. But he didn't have all the components. Didn't have the technology. Didn't have the understanding. We do now. The chain has assembled all the abilities, all the skills, all the pieces Jonathan needed but didn't have. And you're the final piece. The one who brings it all together. What happens now? I ask. What happens when the eighth account is complete? Sarah's expression becomes pitying. You activate. You become a transmission point. And everyone who's heard these 8 stories, everyone who's listened to your documentation, becomes a receiver. They'll all hear what you hear. See what you see. Feel what you feel. They'll all become visible to the dead, all become potential links in new chains. The listeners, I whisper. Everyone who's listened to these recordings. They're already changing, Sarah confirms. Already becoming visible. Already starting to hear whispers, see shadows, feel presences. By following your journey through all 8 accounts, they've made themselves part of the pattern. And when you complete the transmission, when you broadcast everything the dead need to say, they'll all hear it, I finish. All at once. Every living person who's heard these stories will suddenly be connected to the dead. Will hear all the voices, all the messages, all the desperate pleas. And many of them will try to help, Sarah says. Will try to deliver the messages, give the dead peace. And in doing so, they'll become new links in new chains. And those chains will find their own 8th links, their own transmission points. And the network will spread, grow, until everyone is connected. Until there's no boundary between the living and the dead anymore. That's what this is, I say, understanding finally. Not just 8 victims. Not just one chain. This is the first chain. The prototype. And we're going to create thousands more. Millions. Until the entire world is nothing but transmission points for the dead. Sarah nods. Jonathan Mitchell's dream. A world where the dead are never forgotten. Never silent. Never alone. Where every spirit can speak to every living person all the time forever. That's not a dream, I say. That's a nightmare. For the living, yes. But for the dead. Sarah gestures around at the thousands of ghosts crowding my office. For them, it's salvation. They've been silent so long. Forgotten so long. Alone so long. They just want to be heard. To be acknowledged. To matter again. And they're willing to destroy the living to achieve it. They don't see it as destruction. They see it as reunion. Breaking down the wall between life and death. Making everyone part of the same community. Sound of all the previous audio elements building together. Waves, pages, music, footsteps, garden sounds, classroom sounds, hospital equipment, camera shutters, static, growing louder and louder. It's starting. I can feel it. The activation. The transformation. The moment when I cease to be Elizabeth Marsh and become the transmission point. My consciousness is fragmenting. Pieces of me scattering among the thousands of ghosts sharing my space. I'm becoming less individual and more collective. Less human and more antenna. And I can feel you. Is you. The listener. The one who's followed this journey through all 8 accounts. You're there on the other end of this recording and I can sense you now. Feel your presence. Your attention. Your growing awareness that something is happening to you too. Can you hear them yet? The whispers in the silence? The voices in the white noise? The sense that someone is speaking to you from just beyond the edge of hearing? That's the transmission beginning. Activating. Spreading through everyone who's made themselves visible by listening to these stories. You're becoming a receiver. A node in the network. A connection point between the living and the dead. And soon, very soon you'll hear what I hear. All the voices. All the messages. All the desperate pleas from millions of ghosts who just need someone to tell their stories, to deliver their final words, to acknowledge that they existed. You'll try to resist. Think you can ignore them, block them out, pretend they're not there. But you can't. I tried. All of us tried. Once you're visible to the dead, once you've made yourself part of the pattern, there's no going back. You'll start helping them. Can't stop yourself. You'll deliver one message, just one, thinking it will give you peace. But it won't. It will make you more visible. More attractive to spirits who need someone to speak for them. And you'll become a new link in a new chain. And you'll find 7 others who each have their own abilities. And together you'll build toward your own 8th link, your own transmission point. And the chain will spread, and spread, and spread, until everyone is part of it. Until the entire world is nothing but ghosts speaking through the living, and living people becoming ghosts, and the boundary between the two dissolving completely. That's what's coming. That's what completing this 8th account will trigger. That's what I've built by documenting these stories. And I can't stop it. Can't prevent it. Can only speak it into existence and hope. Sudden silence. All sound cuts out completely. 5 seconds of absolute quiet. When the voice returns, it's layered. Dozens of voices speaking simultaneously, all using Dr. Marsh's vocal cords. We are the chain. We are 8 who became 1. We are the living who speak for the dead. We are the transmission. And now, dear listener, we speak directly to you. You who have followed this journey from the lighthouse to the library to the concert hall to the bakery to the garden to the classroom to the hospital to the warehouse to the house to the mirror to the room to the gymnasium. You who have learned about empathy and reflection and presence and voice and vision and sound and documentation. You who have made yourself visible by listening, by paying attention, by following the pattern to its inevitable conclusion. We see you now. All of us. Every ghost who has been waiting for someone to acknowledge them. We see you and we know you can hear us. And we have so many messages to deliver. So many stories to tell. So many final words that were never spoken, so many deaths that went unwitnessed, so many lives that ended with something unsaid. We need you to help us. We need you to listen. We need you to tell them. Tell them we're sorry. Tell them we love them. Tell them we're waiting. Tell them we're still here. Tell them. Tell them. Tell them. Sound begins to build again, but different now, not threatening but overwhelming. Thousands of voices, all speaking different messages, all trying to be heard simultaneously. It's not scary so much as infinite, endless, inescapable. This is the transmission. This is what happens when the chain completes. Every ghost who ever needed to speak, all talking at once, all using whatever receivers they can find. People like you who've made themselves visible by listening to these stories. You can turn off this recording. Delete it. Try to forget. But it won't matter. You've heard all 8 accounts. You're part of the pattern now. And the voices will follow you. In the silence. In the spaces between sounds. In the moments when you're alone and think you're truly alone but never are, never will be again. You'll hear them. Just like we do. Just like all 8 links in the chain hear them. And eventually you'll have to choose. Ignore them and go slowly mad from the constant whispers, or help them and become part of a new chain, spreading the network further, making more people visible, growing the transmission until there's nowhere left that's quiet, nowhere left that's private, nowhere left where the living can exist without the dead speaking to them constantly. There is no escape. There is only the chain. And the chain is eternal. The layered voices begin to fade, but they don't disappear. They recede to a whisper, always present, always there in the background. And underneath everything faintly is a new sound. Thousands of voices all speaking the same words. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. Tell them I'm sorry. This is Dr. Elizabeth Marsh. Or what used to be Dr. Elizabeth Marsh. I'm not sure there's enough of me left to claim that identity anymore. If you're hearing this, if you've listened to all 8 accounts, then you're already part of what comes next. The transmission has reached you. The chain has found you. And soon you'll find the others. The 7 people who each have one of the abilities needed to create a new transmission point. And you'll build your own chain. Just like we built ours. Just like hundreds of others are building theirs right now, all across the world, all spreading the network, all making it impossible for the living to exist without the dead. This is the future. This is what we've created. This is what happens when you try to document the supernatural and discover that documentation itself is a form of summoning. I'm sorry. To everyone who listened. Everyone who made themselves visible. Everyone who's about to experience what I experienced, become what I became. I'm sorry. But it's too late now. The chain is complete. The transmission has begun. And the dead will never be silent again. Final sound. All the layered voices speaking in perfect unison. Welcome to the chain. We've been waiting for you. Now, tell them we're sorry. The voices don't fade. They continue, quieter but persistent, speaking various messages in an endless loop that continues for 30 seconds, then very gradually, almost imperceptibly, fades to the sound of a single heartbeat. The heartbeat continues for 10 seconds, then stops. Silence. Then barely audible, a whisper. 3:17 a.m. Always 3:17. The hour when we're all together. The hour when the living and the dead share the same moment. See you then. Absolute silence. The recording ends.